Chapter 587. The Crown Prince put down his teacup and continued. What we need to do now is to get rid of the rotten flesh and get rid of the sores and warts. At the same time, we need to strengthen our foundation and rebuild our flesh and blood. These so-called important officials in the court are the backbone of the great Ming dynasty. If one official is corrupted, thousands of commoners will suffer. If 10 officials are corrupted, half of the great Ming dynasty sky will collapse. If the officials are gone, we can promote them based on merit. But if the people's hearts are gone, then we have nothing left. Today, not to mention a dozen officials, even if the entire court is oppressing the commoners, I will still kill them without hesitation. Bang! As the Crown Prince spoke, he slammed his palm on the wooden table. The Crown Prince was going to start a massacre tonight. The old eunuch was shocked. Well said. In the hall, Yi Fan secretly applauded the Crown Prince's words. He originally thought that the great Ming dynasty was beyond cure. Now, it seemed that there was still a ray of hope. Your Highness is wise and farsighted. This old servant is inferior, the old eunuch said to the Crown Prince. In a moment, when everyone is here, you order people to bring up the evidence of their crimes. Let them be convinced, the Crown Prince said calmly. And then, the old eunuch looked up at the Crown Prince and asked, "How should we deal with them?" "Kill," the Crown Prince said. "Yes," the old eunuch replied. "Let them die cleanly and don't dirty this place," the Crown Prince continued. "As for their wives and children, don't implicate them. Leave them a way out." "This old servant understands," the old eunuch bowed. On the roof of the hall, Yi Fan nodded repeatedly. This Crown Prince not only had thunderous Vajra means, but he also had the heart of a bodhisattva. He was indeed a rare and wise ruler. Whoosh! The dark clouds in the sky became thicker and thicker. In the blink of an eye, a torrential downpour poured down. Yi Fan circulated his spiritual energy and activated the water avoidance pearl in his pocket. Buzz! A light sphere that was 10 meters in size appeared around Yi Fan, enveloping him and the white fox, Xiao Zhao, as well as the hole in the main hall in an instant. In less than an hour, more than 20 officials dressed in court attire and holding umbrellas entered the Crown Prince's palace. "They are here, Your Highness," the old eunuch said to the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince put down the brush in his hand and leaned back in his chair. His expression was cold as he looked at the officials walking in. After the ministers entered the door, they put away their oilcloth umbrellas and lined up neatly in a wet line, kneeling in front of the Crown Prince. "This humble subject kowtows in salute to Your Highness the Crown Prince. May Your Highness live for thousands of years." The Crown Prince picked up his teacup and drank his tea quietly. The ministers kneeling on the ground looked at each other, not knowing what the Crown Prince was up to. However, they weren't stupid. The dozen or so bamboo slips that had been thrown in front of them told them that the Crown Prince had summoned them in the middle of the night for no good reason. On the other hand, the ministers kneeling at the back were calm and composed. "Everyone rise." The Crown Prince put down his teacup and said calmly, "Thank you, Your Highness." The ministers stood up and stood on either side of the Crown Prince. "Is everyone asleep?" The Crown Prince looked at the ministers who were soaked by the rain and smiled. "Am I disturbing everyone?" "This humble subject doesn't dare." The ministers replied in unison. "This time, I summoned all of you here to show you something." The Crown Prince glanced at the old eunuch beside him. The old eunuch understood and waved his hand. Immediately, 4 junior eunuchs carried a large wooden box in from the side room. Bang! The wooden box landed heavily on the ground. The ministers looked at each other, not knowing what was in the box. "Show it to them." The Crown Prince's voice was cold. When the 4 junior eunuchs heard the Crown Prince's words, they quickly opened the box. All the ministers craned their necks to look inside. Inside the wooden box, there were at least a dozen large paper seals with the names of the ministers on them. "What is this?" the ministers muttered in their hearts. The 4 junior eunuchs distributed the thick paper seals to the dozen or so ministers according to the names on them. Among the ministers, only the 8 people standing at the back didn't get a paper seal. The others all got a copy. Open it and see." The crown prince smiled. "Yes." The ministers answered and opened the paper seals in their hands. They took out the papers and looked carefully. However, when they saw the contents of the papers in their hands, their expressions changed greatly and their faces turned ashen. The papers in their hands were densely packed with records of all the crimes they had committed since they entered the court. Corruption, abuse of the people, forming cliques for personal gain, and betraying the country. Accepting bribes, buying official positions, cheating for personal gain, colluding with officials and merchants one by one, the time, place, person involved, amount of money, testimony, everything was there. Cold sweat appeared on the foreheads of the ministers. The evidence was irrefutable. At this time, they couldn't even say a word of rebuttal. In the hall, it was so quiet that the sound of a needle dropping on the ground could be heard. "What else do you have to say?" The crown prince looked at the panic-stricken ministers and asked calmly, I am guilty. Your Highness, please be merciful and spare my life." The leader of the ministers cried and said. His legs went soft, and he knelt on the ground. "I am guilty. I know I was wrong. Your Highness, please spare my life." The psychological defense of the ministers completely collapsed. They knelt on the ground and cried. They were very clear about the crown prince's way of doing things. He did business according to the rules and didn't care about personal feelings. If a prince broke the law, he would be punished the same as the commoners. They thought that they could retire and return to their hometown before the old emperor abdicated and live the rest of their lives comfortably. Now, it seemed that they were wrong, very wrong. "Seeing that you have done good for the country, I will let your wives and children go." The crown prince slowly closed his eyes. "You can go in peace. Your Highness, please spare my life. Your Highness, I don't want to die. Your Highness, I am willing to atone for my sins," the ministers wailed. The old eunuch made a hand sign, and his eyes widened. Thump, thump, more than a dozen ministers instantly stopped breathing and fell to the ground in a disorderly manner. Yi Fan, who was on the roof, was dumbfounded when he saw this. What kind of technique did the old eunuch use? He actually took the lives of more than 10 people without a sound. "You can all go back." The crown prince opened his eyes and said to the 8 stunned ministers, We will leave." The 8 ministers stammered and walked out of the hall. They even forgot to take their umbrellas. They were completely frightened. Chapter 588. One expert. Yi Fan thought to himself as he frowned on the roof. Now that his spiritual energy was profound and he had obtained the power of the heavenly demon, his breathing was slow and steady. Coupled with the thunder and lightning outside and the torrential rain pouring down, even a top expert would not be able to discover his tracks while he was inside the light sphere. Yet, this old eunuch was still able to detect his presence. There was no need to guess. This old eunuch had already discovered his whereabouts. It was just that he had business to attend to, so he did not point out his hiding place. Who would have thought that there was such a person in the palace? Yi Fan thought to himself as he picked up the white fox beside him. In an instant, he turned into a ray of dazzling green light and zigzagged down the bowl-sized hole in the roof of the main hall and flew into the main hall. Whoosh! Yi Fan appeared out of thin air in the main hall with Baihu in his arms. Since the other party had already discovered him, there was no need for him to continue hiding. The old eunuch narrowed his eyes as he looked at the silver-haired, black-robed young man holding Baihu in his arms. His expression suddenly changed. The green radiance on Yi Fan's forehead, which was overflowing with light, shocked him greatly. This person was already a member of the demon realm. The golden-robed crown prince also frowned at Yi Fan's appearance. He had never seen anyone who could transform into a ray of light and appear. This person's cultivation was so high that he had never seen or heard of it. If he guessed correctly, this person should be the expert sent by Matsumoto Takeyoshi to assassinate him. "Who are you? Why are you sneaking around in the main hall and peeping into the crown prince's palace?" The old eunuch holding a horsetail whisk said coldly, "I'm the 68th generation of Yi family's great-grandson, Yi Fan. Yi Fan said calmly to the old eunuch as he reached out to stroke Baihu. Yi Fan, the old eunuch frowned. You are Yi Fan? Yes, Yi Fan replied. The old eunuch turned around and looked at the crown prince. You are Yi Kong's son, Yi Yun's grandson, Snake's shadow sword Yi Fan? The crown prince's face was filled with shock. He stood up from the main seat and asked in shock, What? Did your highness recognize me? Yi Fan frowned and asked. After getting up, the crown prince walked down the stairs and slowly walked in front of Yi Fan. He circled Yi Fan and sized him up. Yi Fan stared at the crown prince, motionless. After looking around, the crown prince nodded slowly. His silver hair was like snow, his eyes were like stars, his face was like jade, and his hair was like a knife. His temperament was extraordinary, and his cultivation was unfathomable. Beside him was a Baihu. The young man in front of him was exactly the same as the one Yi Kong had described to him in the Mongolian tent a few days ago. This person was the peerless cultivator, the owner of the fleeting fire sword and the snake shadow sword, Yi Fan. Bufan was indeed a dignified man. The crown prince thought to himself, You didn't come to the crown prince palace in the middle of the night to assassinate me and avenge your Yi clan, did you? As the crown prince spoke, he stood in front of Yi Fan and looked at Yi Fan with a calm gaze. If I wanted to kill you, I would have done it openly. I wouldn't hide. Yi Fan lowered his head and stroked the white fox's silky fur as he spoke to the crown prince without even lifting his head. Oh, ha! The crown prince was surprised at first, but then he smiled and said, You are just as your father said, arrogant and unruly, different from the rest. Your highness has seen my father. Yi Fan's expression changed when he heard the crown prince say this. He raised his brows and asked the crown prince, Ha ha ha, I've seen more than just your father, the crown prince said with a smile. I've seen your grandfather Yi Yun and your uncle Yi Chun. What did you do to them? Yi Fan asked the crown prince with a frown. His voice was cold. He was worried that his father and the other two had been held hostage by the crown prince. Don't worry, they're very safe, the crown prince said with a smile. If my guess is correct, they should be on their way back to the Ming dynasty. If everything goes smoothly, they will reach the Ming dynasty in a few days. Reach the Ming dynasty? Yi Fan was confused. A few days ago, I made a trip to Mongolia and saw your 3 relatives with my own eyes. I even ate roast lamb and drank strong wine with them. It was very satisfying. The crown prince turned around with a smile. He shook his golden robe and sat back down on the sandalwood chair behind the wooden table. Your highness went to Mongolia to find them? Yi Fan asked with a frown. Why? I sent people to investigate your Yi family. The so-called forming of cliques and privately minting money were all nonsense. As for your father and the others breaking into the palace at night and plotting to assassinate imperial father, they were all framed by that dog Xuanji. The crown prince took a sip of tea and continued. This time, I went to Mongolia to see the 3 of them. First, it was to clear the Yi family's name and reverse the case. Second, it was to ask the Yi family to help me deal with Matsumoto Takeyoshi's ninja army. Matsumoto Takeyoshi's ninja army? Yi Fan was shocked. Feline, tell him in detail, the crown prince said to the old eunuch as he drank tea. Yes, your highness. The old eunuch turned to Yi Fan and told him how the crown prince secretly contacted the 4 countries to kill Zhou Dao, how he failed at the last minute, how Zhou Dao used his skills to make the ninja army attack the 4 countries' army, and how he led the 4 countries to turn their act into reality. He told Yi Fan everything. After hearing this, Yi Fan's eyes widened and his face was full of disbelief. He didn't expect things to develop to this point. That Matsumoto Takeyoshi was indeed sinister and vicious. He actually used force to turn the situation around. Mr. Yi, I have a presumptuous request, the crown prince said to Yi Fan, who was standing there with a frown. What is it? Yi Fan frowned and raised his head to look at the crown prince. Mr. Yi's cultivation is extremely high, and you're also a dragon of a Yi family. Can you stay by my side and assist me in quelling the rebellion? The crown prince asked Yi Fan. Yi Fan was a member of the Yi family, and his cultivation was so heaven-defying. If he was used by the Crown Prince, it would be like adding wings to a tiger. Thirsty for talent, the Crown Prince extended an olive branch to Yifan. When the Crown Prince said this, Yifan was first stunned. Then he couldn't help but shake his head and smile bitterly. He had originally come to find out about the Crown Prince's movements, but he had unexpectedly been chosen by the Crown Prince. "Why is Mr. Yi smiling?" the Crown Prince asked when he saw Yifan's bitter smile. He put down the fragrant tea in his hand. "Does your Highness not want to know why I'm here?" Yifan looked at the Crown Prince and asked. The Crown Prince frowned and looked at Yifan in confusion. "Matsumoto Takeyoshi ordered me to find out about your Highness's movements. If the time is right, I'll take your Highness's life," Yifan said calmly as he looked at the Crown Prince. When the old eunuch heard Yifan's words, his expression changed, and he raised his head to look at Yifan. You're one of Matsumoto Takeyoshi's men?" the Crown Prince asked Yifan in shock. He had never imagined that this member of the Yi family, who had heaven-defying cultivation, would be working for Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Yifan nodded slowly. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy. "Since that's the case, why aren't you doing anything?" the Crown Prince asked with a frown. "I never had any intention of killing you," Yifan said to the Crown Prince. "Just now, I saw that your Highness sympathizes with the common people and loves them like your own children. You have the heart of a bodhisattva and the methods of a Vajra, so I don't want to kill you. You're the savior of the great Ming dynasty. It's the common people's fortune to have such a good emperor like you." "I don't understand," the Crown Prince said as he looked at Yifan with a confused expression. "What does your Highness not understand?" Yifan asked in return. "Since you have such a state of mind, why are you helping the evildoer do evil and helping that vicious traitor Matsumoto Takeyoshi?" the Crown Prince asked the question in his heart. "I have my own difficulties." Yifan lowered his gaze and spoke. His voice was filled with helplessness. "Difficulties?" the Crown Prince asked in return. "Yes." "What difficulties would make you do such a thing?" the Crown Prince asked. "Status? Status? Wealth? Forgive me for being blunt. With Mr. Ye's abilities, it's impossible for you to defect to the enemy for these things." "It's not these, it's not," Yifan said softly as he shook his head with a sorrowful expression. "Then what is it?" the Crown Prince asked. "The things that Matsumoto Takeyoshi has, the great Ming dynasty has everything." He really wanted to know why Yifan was willing to work for Matsumoto Takeyoshi. "It's my wife," Yifan said as he told the Crown Prince everything about his beloved wife, Fujiwara no Chiko. Bang! Shameless. After hearing Yifan's words, the Crown Prince was instantly enraged. He slammed the table and stood up. The old eunuch also frowned after hearing this, but he didn't say a word. "Right now, I can only think of a way to find the 9 cauldrons. Only then can I save my wife's 2 true souls," Yifan said to the Crown Prince. "I appreciate your Highness' good intentions, but your Highness can rest assured. I won't help Matsumoto Takeyoshi harm the people of the great Ming dynasty. Once I gather the 9 cauldrons and save Chiko, your Highness won't have to do anything. I'll directly take his life." "What is love?" "It's something that can lead to life and death." It's been hard on you." The Crown Prince shook his head and sighed. Since ancient times, how many infatuated men and resentful women had been trapped by love. Even if this young man's cultivation was heaven-defying, he couldn't escape love. "If Matsumoto Takeyoshi has any important news, I'll think of a way to inform your Highness." Yifan cupped his hands and said to the Crown Prince, "If your Highness sees my father and the others again, please don't tell them about me." Since ancient times, it was difficult to be loyal and filial at the same time. But now he couldn't do it at all. "Don't worry, I won't tell them." The Crown Prince frowned and said to Yifan, "Then, your Highness, take care. I'll be leaving," Yifan said, then turned and prepared to leave. "Wait a moment." The Crown Prince called out to Yifan from behind. Yifan turned and looked at the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince walked in front of Yifan and removed a 7-treasure jade pendant from his waist. He extended his hand and handed it to Yifan. "Your Highness, this is..." Yifan didn't understand the Crown Prince's intention. "This is the jade pendant that I've carried with me since I was young." My name is on it. The Crown Prince said to Yi Fan, take this jade pendant. It might be useful to you in the future. Yi Fan took the jade pendant with both hands and held it in his hand. The jade pendant shone brightly with the Crown Prince's name engraved on it. Seeing this jade pendant is like seeing His Highness the Crown Prince. The old eunuch reminded Yi Fan, you should understand the importance of this item. Yi Fan's expression changed when he heard this. With this jade pendant, it was equivalent to having an imperial sword. I'll tell you another secret. The Crown Prince moved his head close to Yi Fan's ear and whispered, there's a cauldron in Tibet. Chapter 589. After Yi Fan left, the golden-robed Crown Prince asked the old eunuch, Feline, compared to this person's cultivation, which is higher and which is lower? The old eunuch holding the horsetail whisk slowly shook his head. What? You are not a match for him, the Crown Prince asked the old eunuch, his tone slightly shocked. Your Highness does not know, but this person has already entered the demonic path. If this old servant fought with him, perhaps I could delay for a while, but in the end, I would be defeated by this person, the old eunuch said with a grave expression. The Crown Prince's expression was shocked, and his heart shook. He knew that this Yi Fan's cultivation was extremely high, but he had not thought that it would be so powerful that even Feline would not be a match for him. Your Highness, you should rejoice that this person is not our enemy. Otherwise, the old eunuch holding the horsetail whisk looked at the Crown Prince and did not continue. While this person is cold and unruly, he is a person of affection and righteousness. The Crown Prince stood with his hands behind his back, shook his head, and sighed. I hope he can find the 9 cauldrons and save his wife. He didn't know why, but he felt a sense of empathy towards Yi Fan. I can see that he has a good impression of your Highness, the old eunuch said to the Crown Prince. Perhaps, the Crown Prince said. Just now, if he had discovered that I was a licentious Crown Prince, presumably, my head would have fallen to the ground. Everything is as you say. I am relatively lucky. This person can be of use to your Highness. It is your Highness' blessing, the old eunuch said. It is reasonable to receive this person's help. I say, Feline, when did you learn to flatter? The Crown Prince said as he turned to look at the old eunuch with a smile. This old servant is not flattering, the old eunuch said with a smile. This old servant is speaking the truth. Don't say this. Hurry and order people to take care of these corpses, and then seal the hole in the hall, the Crown Prince said with a smile. This old servant will do it now. The old eunuch smiled and turned to leave. Yi Fan. The Crown Prince raised his head to look at the hole in the roof of the hall and slowly murmured to himself. High in the sky, a large white, auspicious cloud flew quickly in the direction of Tibet. Tibet has a cauldron. The Crown Prince's words made him go wild with joy. There was no time to lose. He had to rush to Tibet immediately. Now, he was no longer the only one looking for the cauldron. More than a dozen masters sent by Matsumoto Takeyoshi, as well as the mysterious old man from the Song dynasty, were all looking for the 9 divine objects. He had to find it before they did. However, in the midst of his excitement, Yi Fan began to worry again. Tibet was so big. Where was he going to find it? That place was remote, and he did not speak the language, so he had no idea where to start. The only time he went to Tibet was when he went to the Great Snow Mountain to save Xiao Zhao. Wait a minute. Yi Fan had a flash of inspiration. Didn't Xiao Zhao grow up in Tibet? Although it was now Baihu and couldn't speak, it had once told him that its parents often brought it to the temple on the Great Snow Mountain to listen to scriptures. Since that was the case, why didn't he ask the Lama in the temple for help? Although it had been more than 300 years since that time, the prince and the yellow-robed Taoist had been killed by his previous life's eldritch. It had caused a sensation for a time. He believed that the Lama in the temple would not forget this matter. Let's do it this way. Go to the Lama temple on the Great Snow Mountain. Xiao Zhao, let's go to the Great Snow Mountain of Tibet, your hometown, okay? Yi Fan turned his head and asked Baihu, who was lying on his shoulder and looking around inside the spiritual energy shield. Woo, When Xiao Zhao heard Yi Fan say that he was going to take it to the great snow mountain of Tibet, its eyes immediately lit up. It raised its head excitedly and looked at Yi Fan with a pair of clear and transparent eyes. You told me about the temple where your family went to listen to scriptures. Do you still remember? Yi Fan asked Baihu. Baihu nodded. That was the place that left the deepest impression on it. How could I forget? Let's go there now. You lead the way, Yi Fan said to Baihu. In less than an hour, the man and the fox arrived in the sky above the great snow mountain of Tibet. Under the auspicious clouds, the mountains rose and fell endlessly. Although it was not winter yet, there was snow all year round. As far as the eye could see, it was a vast expanse of white. Yi Fan focused his eyes and looked around. According to Xiao Zhao's indication, the temple should not be far from here. Soon, he found the Lama Temple. On the cliff of the highest mountain 500 miles away, a vermilion building came into Yi Fan's sight. It seemed a little abrupt. On the plaque on the door, there were a few golden Tibetan characters. There was no need to guess. It must be the Lama Temple. The reason was very simple. Other than the royal family, only the temples could use vermilion. Yi Fan was delighted. He urged the auspicious clouds under his feet and flew quickly in the direction of the temple. However, when he was less than 3 miles away from the temple, Yi Fan suddenly felt that the auspicious clouds under his feet began to lose their lift and slowly spread out. At the same time, Yi Fan suddenly felt a splitting headache. It was as if something was going to rush out of his brain. Ugh! He covered his forehead with both hands, his face full of pain. Buzz? In between his eyebrows, the inverted swastika written with a green glow suddenly turned blood red. Ugh! Yi Fan's eyes were bloodshot. His face was ferocious, and he let out a low and painful roar. Ugh! Ugh! Baihu, who was lying on Yi Fan's shoulder, was frightened by the scene in front of her. She let out a low cry of panic. Yi Fan was fine just a moment ago. How did he become like this? Baihu looked anxiously at Yi Fan, who was in great pain. She did not know what to do. Whoosh! Just as Yi Fan was in great pain, the auspicious clouds under his feet completely lost their lift and disappeared. Whoosh! A man and a fox suddenly fell from the clouds. The wind whistled in his ears. The air was bone-chilling cold. Yi Fan, who was in great pain, was somewhat awakened by the cold air. When he saw himself falling from the clouds, he endured the splitting headache and fiercely urged the spiritual energy in his sea of vital energy. Buzz! A 5-colored brilliance spread from his body, and the speed of his fall began to slow down. Even so, he still had a terrible headache, and he fell uncontrollably to the ground. After a while, the man and the fox landed on a thick layer of snow. Huff! Huff! Yi Fan sat down on a rock in the snow and panted heavily. Xiao Zhao jumped down from Yi Fan's shoulder and looked nervously at Yi Fan's pale face. I'm fine, Yi Fan said to Baihu while gasping for breath. Baihu tilted her head and looked at Yi Fan. She did not know what had happened. What was going on? Why did the auspicious clouds suddenly lose their lift? Why did he have a splitting headache and was in so much pain? He clearly remembered that when the auspicious clouds dissipated, his heavenly demon power did not react. Even when he used the pure spiritual energy in his sea of vital energy, he could not completely control his body and could only slowly descend. Why? Why was it like this? Yi Fan thought as he checked the spiritual energy in his sea of vital energy. The spiritual energy was still abundant, but could only circulate in his body and could not be released. Seeing this, Yi Fan was stunned at first. Then, he subconsciously closed his eyes and checked his primordial spirit demon soul. Yi Fan was shocked when he used his inner vision. His pupils shrank, and he was dumbfounded. He suddenly realized that the heavenly demon power in his primordial spirit had been completely suppressed by a golden aura. The golden aura on the green and red human-shaped primordial spirit had completely suppressed the evil energy in his primordial spirit and the dazzling red heavenly demon power in his primordial spirit. The two great powers of evil and demon could not move at all. Yi Fan opened his eyes and his face was pale. The two great powers were sealed, and the spiritual energy in his sea of vital energy could not be released. At this time, he was no different from a normal person. If a strong enemy appeared at this time, he might not even have the power to fight back. Thinking of this, he checked the two inner cores in his body. After checking, Yi Fan breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the Fire Snake Dragon Ball and the Ice Core were operating as usual. Yi Fan used the alchemy method that Shui Ziwen had taught him. He activated the Fire Snake Dragon Ball in his sea of vital energy and hit the open ground with his palm. Whoosh, a red beam of light as thick as the mouth of a bowl. It gushed out from his palm. Boom, a loud sound was heard. Heat waves rolled and water vapor filled the air. On the snowy ground that was filled with thick snow, there was a huge pit that was 10 feet deep. Green smoke and water vapor were gushing out of the pit. Yi Fan thought that the inner cores could still be used. If there was a strong enemy at this time, he should be able to deal with it for a while with the two inner cores and the divine weapon in his hand. With this in mind, Yi Fan began to think about why his spiritual energy was suppressed. Just what was that golden light? How could it possess such power? Also, where did the golden light come from? Why did it suppress the spiritual energy in his body? Could it be that there was a sneak attack by an expert? Impossible. If there was such an ability, they could have subdued him directly. Why did they have to be sneaky? Even if there was a sneak attack, he had fallen from the clouds for some time. Why hadn't the expert appeared yet? Yi Fan frowned. He could not figure it out. He looked up at the sky and then looked around. With this look, he saw a person. A few miles away, an elderly lama wearing a red monk robe and a yellow cotton hat stepped on the snow and walked toward him with large strides. The old lama had a dark complexion and kind eyes. He looked like he had been through a lot. The wrinkles on his face were like stone carvings. The bone-piercing cold wind blew his crimson monk robe into the air, causing it to flutter loudly. Yi Fan stood up and looked at the old lama. He carefully observed the old lama who was walking toward him. Anyone would find it strange that an old lama was walking on the snow-covered ground in the middle of the night on a snowy mountain. Although his power was sealed, he could still circulate the spiritual energy in his body. His 5 senses and eyesight were not affected. After some investigation, Yi Fan found that there was nothing strange about this old lama other than his sturdy body. He did not even have a trace of spiritual energy. Even so, Yi Fan did not dare to let down his guard. The old eunuch beside the crown prince looked like an ordinary person. However, he was not careless when he made a move. He made a hand seal, and a dozen officials died in an instant. This was an eye-opener for Yi Fan. He gathered the power of the Fire Dragon Spirit Pearl in his left hand and the power of the Ice Core in his right. He put his hands behind his back, ready to attack at any time. He looked at the old lama again. His robe was fluttering as he hurried over. When he encountered a steep slope, he would sit on the snow and slide down. When he encountered an uphill slope, he would use his hands and feet to climb up. Soon, the old lama was less than 30 meters away from Yi Fan. Chapter 590. After hearing the old lama's words, Yi Fan frowned. This monk knew that he had fallen from the clouds. The cloud riding technique had failed. The sky demon's power had been sealed, and the evil energy had been suppressed. Could it be that all of this was the doing of this monk? How should I address you, great master? And how did you know that I fell from the sky? Yi Fan narrowed his eyes and asked the red-clothed lama, who was slowly walking in front of him. This old monk, Sang Jia, is the abbot of Kaba Temple. I have come on the orders of Dharmaraja to welcome you. The old lama put his palms together and lowered his head as he spoke to Yi Fan. Dharmaraja. Yi Fan frowned after hearing this. What Dharmaraja? Why is he looking for me? Is Mr. Eldritch the one who fought against the 6 immortals 300 years ago? The old lama asked. How do you know? Yi Fan asked in shock. The old lama's words made him secretly shocked. Golden Rock Dharmaraja came to our Kaba temple 3 days ago and personally ordered this old monk to welcome Mr. Eldritch here today. The old lama put his palms together and bowed to Yi Fan as he answered. Golden Rock Dharmaraja? Yifan asked in return. This was the first time he had heard of this name. Golden Rock Dharmaraja is the Vedanta with the highest Buddhist cultivation in Tibet. He is also a reincarnated living Buddha. The old Lama explained to Yifan. Why is he looking for me? Yifan continued to ask. This old monk does not know. The old Lama replied. Dharmaraja only ordered this old monk to come here today to welcome you and settle you in our Kaaba temple. Yifan slowly nodded. It seemed that the Golden Rock Dharmaraja, mentioned by the old Lama, was acquainted with his previous life's eldritch. Otherwise, he would not have sent a monk here to welcome him. Since that is the case, may I ask? Yifan cupped his hands and bowed to the old Lama as he asked. Just now I was hurrying through the clouds. Why did I suddenly lose the ability to rise and fall from the clouds? Not only that, but my spiritual energy cultivation was also suppressed. Why is that? Could it be due to great master's magic? Or was it caused by the Dharmaraja's divine ability? Since this Golden Rock Phawang was the living Buddha with the highest cultivation in the land of Zongdi, his skills must have reached a certain level and his mana must be boundless. To be able to suppress his sky demon power and unseal the evil chi, it should be this Golden Rock Phawang. The old Lama was stunned at first. Then he smiled, revealing his neat, white teeth. This old monk's cultivation is shallow. How could I possibly suppress Mister's cultivation? The old Lama chuckled. As for the Dharmaraja, that's even more impossible. Since he sent me here to welcome you, why would he disperse your auspicious clouds and suppress your spirit chi cultivation? Why is that? Yifan looked at the old Lama's smiling face and knew that the old Lama must know the reason. Mister, you may not know, but this temple enshrines the Buddha's true body, Sarira. It is protected by the true spirit and surrounded by saints, not to mention Mister's auspicious clouds. Even if a true immortal's Holy Spirit comes here, they would have to withdraw their divine ability and pay their respects. You must know that seeing the Sarira is like seeing the Buddha in person. They cannot blaspheme it. The old Lama explained to Yifan. Buddha's Sarira? Yifan was shocked at first. Then he came to a realization. Back then, Brother Kim had been suppressed by the great Buddha's head dazed mantra, known as the king of mantras in the Buddha world, in that mystical sandalwood box. If Brother Kim's cultivation was already like that, then there was no need to talk about him. Moreover, this time it was the Buddha's true body, Sarira. His auspicious clouds had dissipated, so falling from the clouds was natural. But why was his spiritual chi cultivation being suppressed? Why did he have such a splitting headache and unbearable pain? Could it be that all the immortals passing by here had their immortal power suppressed? Why did they have to endure such pain? The Buddha was merciful and compassionate, so this was definitely not the case. Thinking of this, Yifan told the old Lama his doubts. The old Lama laughed heartily. Why are you laughing, Master? Yifan asked in confusion. Mister, you're really muddle-headed, the old Lama said with a smile. Mister, you're now the king of the devil world and possess the power of the heavenly demon. You should know very well what will happen when this evil aura comes into contact with the Buddha's Sarira surrounded by saints. Yifan secretly scolded himself for being muddle-headed. The power of the heavenly demon was boundless. Nothing could resist it, except for Buddha. It was said that when Shakyamuni attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, the devil palace was shaken. The devil king Bo Sun personally led the army of the devil world to stop the Buddha's enlightenment. However, the devil king used all his divine abilities and was easily neutralized by the Buddha. Even the devil king was like this, let alone the king of the devil world. Now, he finally understood the cause and effect of this matter. No matter how powerful the power of the sky demon and the unsealing evil chi were, they were still dark forces. Naturally, they were completely suppressed in front of the Buddha's real body, Sarira. It was disrespectful to fly over the Buddha's real body, Sarira, by riding a cloud. Naturally, the cloud would disperse and slowly fall to the ground from the clouds. However, the two spiritual chis in the body sea of chi were the most masculine yang and the most feminine yin. They were immortal powers, not dark forces. Therefore, they could move freely, but they could not be used. The fire snake dragon pearl and the ice snake inner core were animals' natal spiritual pearls, which were condensed from flesh and blood. Therefore, they were not affected. Junior didn't know the Buddha's Saraira was here. If my words offended you, please forgive me. Yifan cupped his hands and bowed to the old lama. Don't blame me for not knowing. Mister, you don't have to take it to heart. The old lama put his palms together and returned the gesture. Disciple dares not accept the responsibility of troubling Grandmaster to welcome me. Yifan said, Mr. Eldritch is too polite. The old lama said to Yifan, Mister, please follow me back to the temple and rest while waiting for the Dharmaraja's arrival. Then I'll have to trouble Grandmaster. Yifan put his palms together and said respectfully, Mr. Eldritch, please follow me. The old lama said as he extended his hand. Grandmaster, please. Yifan also extended his hand. The old lama smiled and turned to walk towards the temple on the mountain peak. Yifan stepped forward and walked side by side with the old lama. Although they were walking side by side, Yifan maintained half a step behind the old lama to show his respect. The old lama smiled and walked against the wind. Yifan looked forward respectfully. Under the glittering starry sky, a monk and a layman, one old and one young, walked on the snow with their clothes fluttering in the wind. Ever since Yifan had obtained his cultivation, he had rarely walked on the roads, let alone the snowy ground. Now that he was walking, he found it very refreshing. The biting cold wind, the bone-chilling air, the thick snow, and the vast snowy mountain. The feeling of stepping on solid ground made him feel very secure. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. The old lama strode forward and began to recite the 6-syllable mantra as he fiddled with the Buddhist beads in his hand. Although his voice was very low, it was incomparably vigorous. Every word was clear and filled with power. The old lama recited the mantra with a solemn expression. Yifan listened attentively and felt as if he was bathing in the spring breeze. It was unknown whether it was because of the environment, the suppression of his evil aura by the Buddhist power, or the effect of the old lama's 6-syllable mantra. But at this moment, Yifan felt refreshed as he walked in this vast expanse of white heaven and earth. His ears were sharp and his eyes were clear. The 36,000 pores on his body were all free and unrestrained. After the old lama stopped reciting the mantra, Yifan said from the bottom of his heart, Great Master's incantation is really pleasant to hear. The old lama turned around and smiled at Yifan. It's not that this old monk recited it well, but that Sir has the root of wisdom. Great Master must be joking. Yifan blushed with shame. I've already entered the demonic path and become the ruler of the demonic world. If you say I have the demonic root, I might believe it, but if you say I have the root of wisdom, it's simply impossible. Has Sir Eldritch ever heard of the Demon King? The old lama asked Yifan. I know a little. Yifan replied. Oh, tell me about it. The old lama smiled. I heard that when Buddha attained Tao under the Bodhi tree, the Demon King once went to disturb Buddha. In the end, Buddha repelled them one by one. Yifan replied, Is there anything else? The old lama asked. Yifan shook his head. Do you know the past, present, and future of the Demon King? The old lama asked. Yifan shook his head again. The Demon King of the Demon Palace has many names. Bo Sun, Demon Bo Sun, Demon Luo, Son of Heaven Demon, and Lord of Freedom are all his names. Now, he's also known as Tenmoni. The old lama told Yifan. He became the 6th Lord of the Desire Realm because of the merit and good karma he received from offering to Prachi Buddha in the past. He specializes in tempting people, cutting off their good roots, and obstructing righteousness. This demon's demonic power is extremely great. According to the miscellaneous Agama Sutra, for example, among the divine powers of the Desire Realm, Heavenly Demon Bo Sun is number 1. From this, one can see how strong this demon's divine power is. However, Buddha once prophesied that after this demon's blessings run out, he would fall into the great Avicii hell and suffer endless suffering. Only when he suffers endless suffering in hell would he remember Buddha's teachings and cultivate diligently. Finally, he would leave the Avicii hell and be born in the 33 heavens. As the old Lama spoke, he looked at Yifan. Yifan frowned and didn't say a word. He didn't expect the Demon King, Tenmoni, to have such a background. He also didn't expect him to fall into the Avicii hell in the future. No wonder Qing Qinzi didn't tell him about the heavenly demon's power back then. Now that he was the Demon King, he wondered if he would fall into the great Avicii hell like Tenmoni in the future. The old Lama looked at Yifan's expression and turned his head with a smile. It seems like Sir understands this old monk's words. Since Great Master knows that I'm the Demon King, I'm sure Great Master also knows that I have my difficulties, Yifan said to the old Lama. The old Lama turned his head and calmly asked Yifan, which person in the world doesn't have difficulties? Yifan was left speechless by the old Lama's sudden rebuke. Yifan didn't know how to answer. If all the people in the world with difficulties fell into the demonic path like Sir, then wouldn't this world become the demon world? The old Lama asked again. Yifan couldn't say a single word after being questioned. After you used the heavenly demon's power to break the 9 cauldrons barrier, aren't you afraid that when the karma matures, you will fall into the Avicii hell like Tenmoni? The old Lama pressed on. Yifan was sweating profusely and didn't know how to answer. At this moment, he seemed to have been forced into a dead end with nowhere to escape. How is it? Has this old monk stumped, sir? The old Lama asked Yifan with a smile. Great Master's words are as sharp as a knife and as sharp as a sword. Junior is trembling with fear and unease, Yifan said to the old Lama as he wiped his sweat. Ha! The old Lama laughed loudly. The sea of bitterness is boundless. Turn back and see the shore. It's not too late to mend the pen after the sheep have been lost. Yifan was silent. He understood the old Lama's meaning. The old Lama wanted him to give up the heavenly demon's power and return to the righteous path. Junior understands Great Master's meaning, but Junior has no choice right now, Yifan said to the old Lama with a frown. In other words, he still couldn't give up the heavenly demon's power. If you use your appearance to see me and voice to beg me, then you are walking the evil path and can't see Tathagata. Sigh. The old Lama sighed deeply and recited a gatha from the Diamond Sutra. Yifan was silent, and the old Lama didn't say anything else. Chapter 591. He didn't even need to think to know that this monastery was the Kaaba monastery that the old Lama had mentioned. Creak! The old Lama pushed open the door and walked in. Yifan patted the snowflakes off his body and followed the old Lama into the monastery. The Kaaba monastery wasn't very big and took up about 10 mu. Inside the courtyard, there were dozens of huge copper prayer wheels neatly lined up on both sides. They were surrounded by countless prayer flags and appeared especially solemn. Inside the numerous halls, there were Buddha statues that were completely different from those of the Han Dynasty. Countless butter lamps illuminated the halls with golden light. It's late at night, and the monks are all asleep. This old monk will first bring Mister to the guest room to rest. The old Lama said to Yifan as he turned around and closed the door. Thank you for your trouble, Great Master. Yifan observed the environment of the monastery and said, Mister, please follow me. The old Lama said to Yifan as he walked toward a room at the back of the monastery. Yifan followed closely behind. After a while, the old Lama brought Yifan to a Tibetan room. This is the bedroom prepared for Mister. The old Lama stopped and turned to Yifan. This place is remote, and the conditions can't be compared to those large monasteries in the Han Dynasty. I can only trouble Mister. Great Master is too polite. This is already very good, Yifan said to the old Lama. The room has already prepared hot water, tam ba, and some cooked butter tea for Mister. If Mister needs anything else, you can find me in the side hall. The old Lama said, I don't dare to trouble Great Master. This is enough, Yifan respectfully said to the old Lama. Since that's the case, this old monk won't disturb Mister's rest. The old Lama clasped his hands and said to Yifan, Great Master, please, Yi Fan clasped his hands together and returned the greeting. The old lama turned around and left. After Yi Fan watched the old lama leave, he gently pushed open the door and entered the bedroom. As soon as he pushed the door open, a gust of warm air greeted him. The bright oil lamp, the warm brazier, the exquisite thanka, the low wooden table, all the furnishings were filled with a strong Tibetan style. Yi Fan warmed himself up by the fire, rubbed his hands, and slowly walked to the wooden table. He pulled out a wooden chair and sat down. On the wooden table, there was a medium-sized Tibetan food box. It looked quite exquisite. He reached out to open the food box, and a burst of fragrance wafted out from inside. The food in the food box was very simple. There was a large box of tsamba, a pot of butter tea, and 2 medium-sized Tibetan porcelain bowls. "Xiao Zhao, come and eat." Yi Fan took out a few pieces of tsamba from the food box and placed them in a porcelain bowl. Then, he placed them in front of Baihu, who was shaking her head and wagging her tail while drooling. Baihu didn't even smell it. She dived into the bowl and began to eat heartily. She was born in the snowy mountains of Tibet, so naturally, she had a special fondness for the food of her hometown. Ever since she was rescued by Eldritch and brought back to the Lingyun cave, she had never tasted the flavor of her hometown again. "Eat slowly, no one is fighting with you," Yi Fan said with a smile as he stroked Baihu, who was wolfing down the food. He took out a few pieces of tsamba from the food box and placed them in Baihu's bowl. Then he picked up the iron pot in the food box and poured out 2 cups of steaming hot butter tea. He placed 1 cup in front of Baihu. After doing all this, Yi Fan pinched a piece of tsamba and placed it in his mouth. Then, he carried the steaming hot butter tea to the brazier. Although it was already late at night, he was not in the mood to sleep. What was the relationship between that golden rock Fawang and his previous life's Eldritch? Why did he ask the old lama to settle him in this Kaaba temple? To help him? To trap him? Also, where was the divine cauldron that the crown prince spoke of? How did he know that there was a cauldron in Tibet? Countless questions appeared in his mind, causing his mind to be in a mess. Who cares? Since he was already here, he might as well make the best of it. The only thing he could do now was wait. Wait for that golden rock Fawang to appear. As long as he appeared, all the questions would become clear and clear. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Yi Fan pushed the brazier to the side of the bed and then lay down on the bed with his clothes still on. Baihu leaped onto the bed and snuggled up to Yi Fan, sleeping peacefully with its fluffy fox tail as its pillow. It had already formed a habit of not being able to sleep without being next to Yi Fan. In other words, it did not feel safe at all. After running for a long distance and trekking through the snow, the man and the fox quickly fell asleep. Buzz. Not long after Yi Fan fell asleep, a resplendent golden pillar of light descended from the ceiling. It was as if a light barrier had appeared in the bedroom. Yi Fan opened his eyes and abruptly sat up on the bed. The golden pillar of light before him was dazzling and dazzling. There were tens of thousands of rays of light and thousands of strands of auspicious air. Amidst the golden light, a kind-looking old man in yellow slowly appeared. The old man had white eyebrows and a long beard. He smiled at Yi Fan, who quickly sat up from the bed. "Mr. Eldritch, we meet again," the old man said as he dispersed the golden light around him. "This great master must be the golden rock Fawang that Master Sangjia was talking about." Yi Fan asked the old man. "There is no fixed law, and fixed law is illegal," the old man said to Yi Fan with a smile. "It's just a name, no different from dust. It's not worth mentioning." "Junior greets the great master," Yi Fan said as he knelt on the ground and respectfully kowtowed to the old man. This person spoke words of wisdom and the truth of Buddhism, so he was undoubtedly a living Buddha. All appearances are illusory. "Mister, you don't have to adhere to worldly etiquette. Please rise, please rise." The old man reached out and helped Yi Fan up from the ground. Yi Fan stood up and looked at the old man. "The last time I discussed Zen with you, I was only a young acolyte who had just become a monk. Now that we meet again, you and I have already reincarnated. It's true that things have remained the same, but people have changed." The old man looked at Yi Fan and lamented. Did I know you in my previous life, great master? Yi Fan asked. The old man smiled and nodded. So that's it. Yi Fan thought to himself. His deduction was not wrong at all. The two of them knew each other in their previous lives. Master, may I know why you've led me here this time? Yi Fan asked. Of course it's for you, the old man replied. For me? Yi Fan furrowed his brows. You and I had a promise in our previous lives. After we reincarnated and met again, we had to enlighten whoever had the higher realm and help them break away from their cultivation, the old man replied. In order to fulfill this promise, I reincarnated in Tibet for 3 lifetimes, waiting for the day to meet you again. Now that the karma has matured, we finally meet again. Yi Fan was shocked when he heard this. In order to meet him, the old Dharma king had actually reincarnated 3 times in this Tibetan land. Great master! Yi Fan was so moved by the old man's words that he could not speak. I have a piece of advice. I hope you can rein in your horse at the edge of the cliff and behave yourself, the old man said to Yi Fan. As for whether you listen or not, it all depends on your fate. Great master, please speak, Yi Fan said with reddened eyes. Mortal and Bufon are separated by a single thought. The old man looked at Yi Fan with a calm expression and said, Mortal is mortal. Bufon is holy. Those who forget both mortal and holy are Buddhas. As the saying goes, the mortal does not decrease and the holy does not increase. To see all forms is to see Tathagata. Yi Fan seemed to understand after hearing this. Mortal Bufon. Yi Fan Bufon. There really seemed to be an inextricable connection between mortal and Bufon. But even so, Yi Fan still could not understand the profound meaning behind the old man's words. Great master, I don't understand. Yi Fan raised his head and frowned at the old man. You are now the ruler of the demon world, and a layer of the seal has been broken. Have you ever thought about what you will become in the future? Demon? Human? Both human and demon? When a master of the demon world, Tenmoni, falls into hell in the future, who will rule the demon world? You? Do you also want to fall into eternal damnation? Qing Chenzi asked you to find the 9 cauldrons not only to save your wife, but more importantly, to let you accumulate great merit. But you have entered the demon path and embarked on the path of evil. In this way, what is the use of finding the 9 cauldrons? What is the use of understanding the supreme secret text? When you fall into hell, it will be too late to regret. Yi Fan was silent and did not say a word. Listen to my advice. The sea of bitterness is boundless. Turn back to the shore before it is too late, the old man said to Yi Fan. Great master, you want me to give up everything I am doing now? Yi Fan asked with a frown. Not give up, but let go, the old man said to Yi Fan. Have you forgotten what Qing Chenzi said to you that day? As long as you let go of your wife, regardless of Buddhism or Taoism, and focus on cultivation, the two of you will be safe and sound. Love, hate, affection, and enmity are illusory, and the past will be written off. Love, hate, affection, and enmity are illusory, and the past will be written off. Yi Fan repeated this sentence repeatedly with red eyes. These 14 words were like 14 steel knives that stabbed into Yi Fan's heart, making him feel so much pain that he wished he was dead. Great master, I can't do it. Thinking of his wife's crazy appearance and Xiao Zhao's fox body after losing her inner core, Yi Fan's eyes teared up. He slowly shook his head and said firmly, Amitabha. The old man chanted and slowly shook his head. In order to enlighten you, I have waited for more than 300 years. In the end, I came with nothing and left with nothing. After the old man finished speaking, he slowly turned around and the golden light around him shone again. Everything is like a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a shadow, like dew, like lightning. Mr. Eldritch, we will meet again if fate wills it. The old man chanted the Vajra Sutra and slowly disappeared. In the room, only the red-eyed Yi Fan and the soundly asleep Baihu were left. Great master, great master. Yi Fan, who was on the bed, shouted as he sat up on the bed. The sky was bright and the sun had risen. Baihu was staring at Yi Fan with a pair of clear and transparent eyes. She looked suspiciously at the sweaty and teary-eyed Yifan. So it was a dream. After taking a good look at his surroundings, Yifan let out a long sigh. What a realistic dream. He wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes and thought in his heart. Clap, clap, clap. Clap, clap, clap. Just when he thought that a long night would lead to many dreams, there was a hurried knock on the door. Mr. Eldritch. Mr. Eldritch. It was the voice of a young llama, sounding very anxious. Yifan tidied up his hair and clothes, quickly walked to the door, and opened it. Mr. Eldritch, Golden Rock Fawang has passed away. Our temple's abbot, Master Sangjia, has already rushed to Golden Rock Temple to send him off. Outside the door, a young llama who looked to be 17 or 18 years old said to Yifan with red eyes. Chapter 592. Dharmaraja has passed away? Yifan asked as he steadied himself. Yes. The little llama's eyes were red as he said, Before the abbot left, he told me to tell you that Dharmaraja has passed away and will not see you again. You can leave now. The little llama put his palms together and bowed to Yifan, then turned around and left. Yifan froze in place, unable to believe that this was real. The dream just now was not an illusion. It was so real that it could not be any more real. This friend of his from his previous life, after failing to enlighten him, suddenly said goodbye and passed away. He waited for 3 lifetimes just to meet him, to fulfill his promise from his previous life. 2 streams of hot tears flowed out of Yifan's eyes. Xiao Zhao, let's go, Yifan said in a low voice. He bent down and picked up Baihu, then closed the door and slowly walked towards the entrance of the temple. Baihu in his arms looked at Yifan's sorrowful expression, her face full of confusion. He still hasn't seen Golden Rock Dharmaraja. Why is he so sad about Dharmaraja's death? Woo! Baihu in Yifan's arms whimpered as she raised her front paws and clawed at Yifan's chest. She looked at Yifan with heartache. I'm fine, Yifan with red eyes said as he stroked Baihu's forehead and squeezed out a smile. He came to the entrance of the temple and pushed open the door. Stepping on the thick snow, he slowly walked towards the bottom of the vast snowy mountain. The bone-chilling wind blew on his face like a knife. Yifan had a sorrowful expression as he walked against the wind and snow, not saying a word. Baihu knew that Yifan was in a bad mood, so she obediently curled up in Yifan's arms. From time to time, she would lick Yifan's hand to comfort Yifan. Usually, Yifan would be able to ignore the distance of 1.5 kilometers. However, it was a difficult task for him now. His demonic powers had been sealed, his cloud riding technique had lost its effect, and he was unable to release the spiritual energy in his sea of qi. Now, he could only walk step by step out of this vast snowy mountain. After walking for 2 hours, Yifan finally reached the mountainside of the snowy mountain. After walking out of the Buddha's relics area of influence, Yifan felt his demonic power gradually recover. The golden Buddha's power that was suppressing it also began to slowly disappear. Regaining his lost power should have been something to be happy about, but at this moment, Yifan couldn't feel happy at all. Losing an old friend from a previous life who had bitterly waited for him for 3 lifetimes. If it was anyone else, they wouldn't be happy. However, despite the pain, the search for the cauldron had to continue. After recovering his strength, Yifan used his movement skill and flew down from the mountainside to the foot of the snowy mountain. At this time, the sky was already bright, and the stone road at the foot of the mountain was already bustling with people. Among these people, there were shop assistants who got up early to do business, laborers who got up early to provide 3 meals a day for their families, craftsmen who kept clanking and hammering, and pilgrims who knelt down every 3 steps and bowed every 5 steps with a pious look on their faces. Everyone had their own destiny, and his destiny was to find the 9 cauldrons and save his wife. Walking through the bustling streets, Yifan sighed with emotion as he looked at the busy people. He walked around the streets a few times and then settled down in an owned by Han people. The search for the cauldrons couldn't be rushed. He had to find the relevant clues first and then carefully investigate. He couldn't be like a headless fly running around. After paying the money and checking into the room, Yi Fan called out to the waiter. "Little brother, I want to ask you something." Yi Fan said to the waiter. "What are you talking about, sir?" "You can ask whatever you want, as long as it is something this little one knows." The waiter politely replied. "Is there a place to store the county records in Tibet?" Yi Fan asked the waiter. The local county records generally recorded the local affairs and all kinds of supernatural phenomena. As long as you carefully investigate, you should be able to find the traces of the divine cauldrons. The place to store the county records? The waiter was stunned at first, and then replied, "Sir, are you asking about the document courtyard in Tibet?" "The document courtyard?" Yi Fan asked. "This document courtyard is responsible for all the local literature and history of Tibet, as well as engraved books. It is the highest official residence here. The local county records that you're talking about should be there." The waiter replied to Yi Fan, "Is the highest official in this document courtyard a Han or a Tibetan?" Yi Fan heard the waiter say so, and his eyes immediately lit up. The various official positions in this Tibetan area are generally under the joint jurisdiction of Han and Tibetan officials. The electric waiter replied, "This document courtyard involves Han and Tibetan culture, so it should be the same. This little one is just an in-waiter and has never been to this Tibetan official's residence. Sir, please forgive me." After Yi Fan heard this, he slowly nodded. "What? So wants to go to the document courtyard?" The waiter asked. "Oh, I was asked by a friend to go there and engrave a few sets of Tibetan scriptures to bring back to the Han." Yi Fan lied to the waiter. "So it's like this?" The waiter nodded. "Where is this document courtyard?" Yi Fan asked the waiter. "It is directly east of here. It is a bit far from here, about 300 or 400 miles away." The waiter said, "If you take a yak cart, it will take at least 3 days to go back and forth." "Thank you, little brother." Yi Fan took out a golden leaf from his bosom and handed it to the waiter. Sir, this is too much." The waiter saw Yi Fan take out a golden leaf and was a little surprised for a moment. "This is my first time in Tibet, so I am not familiar with this place. I may have to trouble little brother in the future." Yi Fan said to the waiter, "Sir, rest assured, as long as I can help you, I will do my best. I will do my best." The waiter made a small fortune and was beaming with joy. "I like peace and quiet. If there is anything, I will call you. If there is nothing, don't disturb me." Yi Fan continued, "Don't worry, this little one understands." The waiter said, "You rest first. If there is anything you need, just tell this little one." Yi Fan nodded. The waiter smiled and bowed out of the room, gently closing the door. Yi Fan poured a cup of tea and drank it while thinking about his next plan. He had already calculated that when there was no one at night, he would go to the document courtyard and check the local county records there. If he was lucky, he might be able to find a specific location of the divine cauldron. He would do that. Yi Fan drank his tea slowly. The day passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, the sky was getting dark and the sun was setting in the west. Bright stars filled the sky. Seeing that it was getting late, Yi Fan put Baihu, who had been sleeping all day, on his shoulder. Then he used the ghostly body movement skill and turned into a ray of light. He rushed out of the window and went straight into the clouds. He stepped on the auspicious clouds and focused his eyesight. He looked at the ground carefully while flying slowly. Soon, a slightly tall building appeared in his sight. This building was more than 3 stories high. It was half Han and half Tibetan. There were 2 soldiers guarding the door. There was no need to guess that this was the Scrivener courtyard that the waiter had mentioned. Seeing that he had found the document courtyard, Yi Fan used his body movement skill and left the auspicious clouds. He disappeared into thin air. Buzzed with a flash of green light, Yi Fan, who was wearing a black robe and had silver hair, walked out of the green light slowly. He was squatting on Baihu's shoulder. Around him, tall bookshelves were arranged neatly around him. On the bookshelves, there were all kinds of books. The air was filled with the fragrance of ink. He was now on the 3rd floor of the document courtyard. At this time, there was no one in the courtyard. Although this was the highest office in the Tibetan area, it was full of all kinds of books. There were no valuable items. Therefore, there was no one on duty. Yi Fan walked slowly to the front of the bookshelves. He reached out and pulled out a few books. He flipped through them casually. Yi Fan's heart skipped a beat when he saw the books. The words in the books were all in Tibetan. He didn't know a single word. He was so muddle-headed that he even forgot about this. What should he do? Yi Fan frowned and put the books back to their original place. After thinking for a moment, Yi Fan suddenly had a bold idea. Since he didn't know the Tibetan language, he would simply find the official in charge of this place and let him find it. Anyway, he had the jade pendant that the crown prince gave him. Now was the time to use it. The old eunuch had said that seeing the jade pendant was like seeing the crown prince. A mere local official would definitely not dare to disobey the order. Thinking of this, Yi Fan walked down the stairs and slowly walked out of the stone building. The two soldiers guarding the door were leaning against the stone wall and yawning. Suddenly, they saw a black robe and silver hair man slowly coming out of the door of the courtyard. He looked at the two of them with a strange smile. Yi Fan's appearance made the two soldiers' hair stand on end. They were scared out of their wits and screamed, "Ah!" They threw down the weapons in their hands, threw away their helmets and armor, and screamed for their lives. In the middle of the night, a man with silver hair slowly came out of the closed door. Anyone would be scared out of their wits. Looking at the two soldiers running for their lives, Yi Fan, who came out of the door, smiled. It wouldn't be long before the highest official here appeared. What he needed to do now was to wait here. Sure enough, in less than the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, a group of people on horses came from afar. Walking at the front were the two guards who were scared out of their wits. Behind him were two officials, one Tibetan and one Chinese. More than 10 tall soldiers with hidden swords at their waists followed in formation. What made Yi Fan not know whether to laugh or cry was that there was a tall red-clothed lama with half his arm exposed. It seemed that they really thought he was a ghost. Yi Fan thought to himself. When they saw the black-robed and silver-haired Yi Fan standing at the door of the document courtyard, the two soldiers immediately pointed at Yi Fan and reported to the two officials in Tibetan. The two officials were also stunned when they saw Yi Fan. The two of them looked at the tall red-clothed lama behind them. The red-clothed lama frowned and looked at Yi Fan. Then, he said a few words to the two officials in Tibetan. The general meaning was that this was a person, not a ghost. "Who are you? You actually used sorcery to barge into the document courtyard." The official in Han official's robes asked Yi Fan sternly. He saw that Yi Fan's black robe was not Tibetan, so he asked in Chinese. Yi Fan did not answer. He took out the jade pendant the crown prince gave him and threw it to the official in Han official's robes. The official in Han official's robes caught it and looked at the item in his hand suspiciously. Chapter 593. Long live your highness, the crown prince. After seeing the jade pendant, the official in Han clothing immediately pulled the puzzled Tibetan official to kneel on the ground, holding the jade pendant with both hands and saying long live. Voila! Seeing the two officials kneel, the dozen soldiers behind them also knelt down and saluted Yi Fan. "What is your name? What is your position?" Yi Fan said as he slowly walked in front of the official in Han clothing. He reached out to take the jade pendant and put it in his pocket. "I am Su Song, the supervisor of this Scrivener courtyard." The official in Han clothing respectfully replied. "Stand up and speak." Yi Fan said. "Yes." The official in Han clothing stood up and stood with his hands by his side. "I am here on the orders of the crown prince to do a secret mission. Tell them to withdraw. I have something important for you to do." Yi Fan said to the official in Han clothing, "Remember, you are not allowed to reveal my arrival to anyone. Those who disobey will be beheaded." "Yes." The official in Han clothing saluted Yi Fan, then turned around and said a few words to the crowd in Tibetan. Everyone's expression changed slightly. After bowing to Yi Fan, the soldiers followed the Tibetan officials and retreated respectfully. They disappeared into the vast night. At the entrance of the Scrivener courtyard, only Yi Fan and the official in Han clothing named Su Song were left. Does this Scrivener courtyard have all the county records of Tibet? After everyone left, Yi Fan asked Su Song, replying to Darren, in this Scrivener courtyard, except for this year's county records. The rest are all sealed in the Scrivener courtyard's library. Su Song respectfully replied. Yifan nodded and said, "Help me do one thing now. Compile all the myths and legends of Tibet into a book and give it to me in 3 days." All the myths and legends of Tibet. Mystical things? Su Song frowned. What? Is there a problem? Yifan asked when he saw Su Song's troubled expression. Sir, please allow me to report, Su Song said respectfully to Yifan. Most of the Tibetans in the Tibetan area believe in religion. There are many myths and legends and countless miraculous things. Even if I don't eat or sleep for 3 days, it's impossible for me to organize all the miraculous things into a book. I only want the outline of the incident. I don't need the details, Yifan said to Su Song. You only need a few strokes. If I have any questions after reading it, I will come and talk to you in detail. If that's the case, this official will only need 1 day to complete it, Su Song said to Yifan. That's great. Yifan nodded and said, I'll wait for you here tomorrow night. Give me the scroll. Yes, sir, Su Song replied. Remember, you can't let anyone else know about this. Do you understand? Yifan reminded Su Song. This official understands. Su Song cupped his hands and replied. Good. Yifan nodded slowly. You go and take care of this matter. Yes, sir. Su Song bowed to Yifan. This official will take his leave. After speaking, Su Song bowed and left. Yifan stood there for a long time, then used his movement technique to return to the inn. Time quickly passed, and it was the night of the second day. After Yifan and Baihu had eaten at the inn, they stepped on the auspicious clouds and once again arrived in the sky above the document courtyard. At this time, the official called Su Song was wearing casual clothes and waiting at the entrance of the document courtyard. He was holding a thick book in his hands. Shua! Yifan dispersed the auspicious clouds and used his strange movement technique, instantly disappearing into thin air. You've come. Su Song, who was holding the book, was looking into the distance when Yifan's voice suddenly came from behind him. He was startled by this voice and instinctively turned around. Sir! Sir! Yifan's sudden appearance and disappearance shocked him. How long have you been waiting? Yifan asked. This official has just arrived. Su Song tried to make his voice as calm as possible. This young man's clothes were strange, and his whereabouts were erratic. He was elusive and mysterious. He was definitely not an official of the imperial court. But even so, he did not dare to have any doubts. The jade pendant in this person's hand was indeed the personal jade pendant of the current imperial court's crown prince. Currently, the crown prince was in charge of the imperial court. He was in charge of military affairs and exercised the power of the country. No one dared to disobey his orders. To be able to obtain the crown prince's jade pendant, this person's relationship with him must be very close. Su Song thought in his heart. Have you prepared the things I asked for? Yifan calmly asked Su Song. Sir, it has been prepared. Su Song said and handed the book in his hands to Yifan. This official has compiled the miracles and strange things in the entire Tibetan area into a book. Please check it, sir. Yifan took it with one hand and casually flipped through it. He saw that inside the book, it was densely filled with small characters. The handwriting was delicate and neat, and the classification was clear. Time, place, occurrence, outline of myths and legends, the beginning and end of the miracles and strange things, everything was there. Thank you for your hard work. Yifan looked at the book in his hand and said to Su Song, Sir is too polite. Su Song replied, This matter ends here. I have not been here, understand? Yifan closed the book in his hand and raised an eyebrow at Su Song. This official understands. Su Song cupped his hands and replied, This official has not seen sir. Yifan nodded and said, I still have something to do. I will leave first. Farewell, sir. Su Song cupped his hands and bowed deeply to Yifan. When he straightened up, Yifan was already nowhere to be seen. He is truly an expert. Su Song sighed from the bottom of his heart. After returning to the inn, Yifan brewed a large pot of strong tea, then placed the book on the table and carefully flipped through it. Baihu obediently lay on the table and quietly accompanied Yi Fan, a man, a fox, and a lamp. At this moment, the scene was like a scene from a supernatural novel. Yi Fan flipped through the book page by page, not missing any clues. Su Song was right. There were many myths and legends in Tibet, and there was an endless stream of mystical things. There were stories of the divine lake, legends of the living Buddha, snow mountain monsters, and mountain gods. There were too many to mention. Yi Fan read for an entire night before he finished reading the entire book. He was completely unaware that the lamp had run out of oil, the charcoal had been extinguished, and Baihu was sleeping soundly. He still gained something from this night's hard work. He found a few places where the divine cauldron might be hidden. Nanso, one of the divine lakes in Tibet. This lake was like the blue sky falling to the ground. Hence, it was known as the Heavenly Lake. There were many mystical things happening in this lake. According to the records, more than one person had seen a huge fish more than 10 feet long swimming on the surface of the lake. There were also people who had heard a loud bang coming from the lake and a pillar of water soaring into the sky. Thinking about the divine cauldron in the Heavenly Lake, Yi Fan vaguely felt that the divine cauldron might be located in this divine lake. The second place was a piece of divine stone that was worshipped by the local people. This piece of divine stone was extremely huge, more than 10 feet tall. It was fiery red like a small red mountain, standing at the peak of Snow Mountain. No one knew when this piece of divine stone appeared. They only knew that it had existed for at least 1,000 years. According to the records, this piece of divine stone was extremely mystical. It would not be touched by rain, and Feishue would not fall. No one could get close to it within a radius of 10 feet. This phenomenon made Yi Fan think of the powerful barrier surrounding the divine cauldron. The third place that made Yi Fan suspicious was the highest peak in the snowy region, the highest peak in the Himalayas, Mount Komolangma. In Tibetan mythology, Mount Komolangma was considered the third of the 5 fairies. It was known as the Supreme Mountain, the divine mountain that eagles could not fly over. According to the records, someone had seen an immortal appear on the divine mountain and fly up into the sky. In Yi Fan's opinion, it might not be an immortal, but a cultivation expert looking for the divine cauldron. These 3 places were the most likely places, and they were also Yi Fan's main targets of investigation. There were still a few other suspicious places, but the possibility was not very high. The plan now was to start from these 3 places and investigate them one by one. Thinking of this, Yi Fan slowly closed the thick book. At this time, it was already early in the morning. The cold air and the clues that he had just obtained made him unable to sleep. He took some charcoal from the corner of the wall and placed it in the brazier. He urged the fire snake dragon ball in his body to ignite it. Then, he picked up Baihu, who was sleeping on the table, and placed her on the bed, covering her with a blanket. Xiao Zhao had stayed up with him for most of the night and was sleeping soundly at this time. After Yi Fan covered Baihu, he opened the door and went downstairs to instruct the waiter to prepare 2 big bowls of lamb bone soup and 5 jeans of cooked beef. He stayed up all night without sleep, and his stomach was already rumbling with hunger. In addition, this was Tibet, the air was thin, and the climate was cold. He needed some high-temperature food to maintain his strength. When the waiter heard the God of Fortune's request, he immediately ordered the kitchen to prepare it immediately. In a short while, 2 big bowls of steaming lamb bone soup and fragrant cooked beef were ready. "Sir, I will send it to your room," the waiter said to Yi Fan as he deftly put the food into the food box. "No need, I can bring it up myself." Yi Fan took the food box and said, "I will be staying here for a few days. You prepare 2 big bowls of lamb bone soup and cooked beef every night. I will come and get it myself." "Yes, sir." The waiter nodded. "Okay." Yi Fan carried the food box and slowly walked upstairs. For him, it was not suitable to go out during the day to search for the cauldron. This was the Tibetan area, and almost everyone believed in Buddhism. The 3 places where the sacred cauldron could be hidden would have many pilgrims during the day. Only at night was the best time for him to search for the cauldron. "Waiter, give me a bowl of lamb soup and 2 jeans of cooked beef. At the same time Yi Fan was walking up the stairs, a burly man who spoke stiff Chinese walked in from outside the door. As he spoke, he raised his head and looked at Yi Fan, who was walking up the stairs slowly with a food box in his hand. This man had a ferocious face. He was wearing a brown Tibetan robe. He was tall and strong, like an iron tower. The waiter was stunned. Generally, most of the people who came to their shop were Han people. They did business with Han people. Those Tibetans almost never came to stay here, let alone eat. "I'm talking to you, Han dog. Do you hear me?" "Pa," the burly Tibetan said, and slammed his palm on the counter. A huge palm print more than an inch deep immediately appeared on the counter. From the beginning to the end, this person's eyes never left Yi Fan. Yi Fan stopped in his tracks when he heard Han Go's name. He turned his head and looked at the Tibetan with a blank expression. The Tibetan sneered and looked at Yi Fan with disdain. Please wait a moment. It will be ready soon." The waiter was scared by the strength of the burly man's palm. He stammered and staggered into the kitchen. It was better to avoid trouble. They could not afford to provoke this kind of person. Yi Fan turned his head and slowly went upstairs. He was here to search for the cauldron, so he had to keep a low profile. After all, he was not the only one looking for the cauldron. It was easier to teach this person a lesson than to kill an ant. But in that way, he was likely to attract the attention of others. He was lucky today. Chapter 594. A day passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it was already night time. The lanterns were lit, and Mingyu hung high in the sky. Yi Fan blew out the candles and placed Baihu, who had been recuperating all day, on his shoulder. Using his movement technique, he turned into a green light and flew out of the window, straight into the clouds. Lake Namu Qo was the closest to here, about 300 miles away. He wanted to go there first to check it out. If he was lucky, he might be able to find the divine cauldron tonight and obtain the patterns on the cauldron. Yi Fan, who was on top of the auspicious clouds, thought to himself. The auspicious clouds were as fast as lightning, and the 300 miles were covered in the blink of an eye. Yi Fan soon arrived above Lake Namu Qo. He stopped the auspicious clouds and looked down from the clouds. Beneath his feet, there was a wide lake, like a huge blue gem embedded in the ground. Under the illumination of the starlight, the surface of the lake flickered with specks of brilliance, as if it was a paradise. This Lake Namu Qo was worthy of being called a heavenly lake. It was indeed magnificent and magnificent. However, Yi Fan was not in the mood to appreciate this rare beauty. Seeing that there was no one around the lake, he immediately dispersed the auspicious clouds under his feet and floated down from the sky like a leaf. Buzz! The water-repelling pearl shone again, and a huge transparent light shield covered Yi Fan and Baihu, who was lying on his shoulder. Splash! With a burst of snow-white water, Yi Fan's figure rushed into the lake. This divine lake was not as deep as Yi Fan imagined. The deepest part was only 100 feet. With the experience of finding the cauldron at Sisui River, Yi Fan skillfully activated the water-repelling pearl and quickly reached the bottom of the lake. The lake water was clear and translucent under the moonlight, and the line of sight was excellent. Yi Fan kept the water-repelling pearl 3 feet away from the bottom of the lake, and used his spiritual power to activate the pearl, quickly moving toward the center of the lake. While moving forward at high speed, he used all the senses in his body to carefully sense all the movements around him. Baihu lay on Yi Fan's shoulder, looking curiously at the school of fish that constantly shuttled past them. Although it grew up in the Tibetan area, its range of activity was very small. It had never come to the Namso Lake in the hearts of the Tibetans, let alone enter the lake. Under Yi Fan's control, the water-repelling light ball was extremely fast. In less than half an incense stick's worth of time, it had already reached the center of the divine lake. This was the deepest place in the entire divine lake, and also the place where the divine cauldron was most likely to be hidden. Yi Fan slowed down the speed of the waterproof light ball and focused his mind, fully sensing the movements here. Whoosh! A huge black shadow flashed past several hundred feet in front of him, stirring up waves of turbulence. Wu, Baihu, who was on Yifan's shoulder, was startled by this scene. She whimpered and curled up her body. Don't worry, it's just a big fish. Yifan patted Baihu on his shoulder and comforted her. Fish? There is such a big fish? Upon hearing Yifan's words, Baihu turned to look at Yifan with a shocked expression. In her memory, the largest fish was only a foot long. But that black shadow, just now, was at least over 100 feet long. Silly girl, there are many fish bigger than this. Yifan chuckled when he saw Baihu's shocked expression. He had been in the East Sea for a period of time, and he had seen all kinds of big fish. One of them was called a whale. Its body was so large that it was even larger than the Matsumoto Takayoshi's battleship. However, Yifan's keen eyesight had seen all of this. Baihu didn't like seawater, and her eyesight was ordinary. Furthermore, she spent most of her time in the cabin of the ship, so it was normal that she hadn't seen any big fish. Baihu blinked with an incredulous expression. Yifan smiled and continued to urge the ball of light to move forward in the lake of divinity, and then hundreds of kilometers away. A Tibetan blade made of fine steel gently extended through the gap in the door of Yifan's room. Then it flicked upward. Crack! The crossbar of the door was suddenly pushed aside. Creak! The door was pushed open from the outside, and a burly man flashed in from outside. He turned around and closed the door again. This person was dressed in black, and his body was like an iron tower. There was a fierce glint in his eyes. It was none other than the burly Tibetan man who had come to the inn in the morning. Taking advantage of the moonlight, he quickly walked to Yifan's bed and quickly searched around. However, there was nothing on the bed except for the bedding. The Tibetan man came to the wooden table and continued to search. When he saw the thick ancient book on the wooden table, his eyes suddenly lit up, and he picked it up to flip through it. After seeing Yifan use a brush to make a few marks on the ancient book, the Tibetan man's eyes immediately lit up with excitement. When Yifan returned to the sky above the inn, it was already 6 hours later, and the sky was gradually brightening. After almost an entire night of searching in the Lake of Divinity, he did not find anything strange except for a few slightly mature big fish. Although he had mentally prepared himself for the fact that there was no divine cauldron in the Lake of Divinity, he still could not help but feel a little disappointed. He turned into a green light and returned to the room. He poured a large bowl of water for Baihu to drink. Then he laid down heavily on the bed, his hands on the pillow, and his brows tightly knitted. There was no divine cauldron in the Lake of Divinity, and the only suspicious places left were the Divine Stone and Mount Everest. He was worried that if there was no divine cauldron in these two places, what should he do? From what the Crown Prince had said to him, the Crown Prince did not know the exact location of the divine cauldron. He only knew that the divine cauldron was in the Tibetan area. Otherwise, it was impossible for him not to tell him. Forget it, I won't think too much about it. I'll finish searching the remaining two places first. Yifan, who was lying on the bed, thought that perhaps the next place would be the location of the divine cauldron. Thinking of this, Yifan sat up from the bed. Xiao Zhao, don't drink water. Brother, you will make you some mutton bone soup to warm your body. Yifan said to Baihu as he stood up. The mutton bone soup made by the inn chef was very good. It tasted delicious and did not have any rank odor. The fragrance of the bones filled the air, and the meat was fat and tender, causing Yifan to greatly praise it. Last time, he brought back 2 bowls of mutton bone soup, and one of them was for Xiao Zhao to drink. Ever since Yifan opened the door to meet for Xiao Zhao, she did not refuse any of the food that Yifan gave her, whether it was meat or vegetables. Hearing that Yifan was going to get the mutton bone soup, Baihu stopped drinking water and licked her lips. She was the same as Yifan. She liked the mutton bone soup very much. Yifan smiled. He walked to the door, reached out to open it, and walked out. However, the moment he opened the door, Yifan's expression changed, and he stopped in his tracks. The door had been opened. Yifan was secretly shocked. He remembered very clearly that he had personally fixed the door and had never opened it before. Every time he went out, he would turn into a blue light and fly out through the window. He never went through the door. This door had a special feature. It could only be opened from the inside and could not be opened from the outside. Of course, this was under normal circumstances. Anyone with a bit of experience in the Jianghu would be able to easily open the door. As the saying goes, it is better to guard against a gentleman than against a villain. Yifan returned to the room and closed the door. Then he crouched down and carefully examined the door. Below the door, he could clearly see a knife mark. From the fresh wood grain at the edge of the knife mark, it had appeared after he had gone out last night. It seemed that someone had come here last night with a sharp knife. As for why, he did not know. Perhaps it was for money, or perhaps it was to kill. Of these two motives, Yifan was more inclined to believe the former. He had always been generous. It was possible that there were bandits in this inn who had set their sights on him. As for wanting to kill him, the possibility was not high. He did not have any enemies in this life. Or it could be said that those who had enemies had already died at his hands. For example, the 3 bandits in the restaurant, and those hedonistic sons of rich parents in the bun shop. The only enemies left were Matsumoto Takayoshi's side and his enemies from his previous life. However, these 2 points were completely impossible. Not to mention that Matsumoto Takayoshi still needed him. Even if he did not need him, he would not send such trash to die. As for the enemies from his previous life, that was even more impossible. A person who could live for more than 300 years would naturally have a cultivation base. There was no need for him to go through the door. It seemed that this should be a passerby thief. After coming to this conclusion, Yifan smiled and opened the door to go downstairs. He took the mutton soup and beef. 1 man and 1 fox wolfed it down. After eating and drinking to their fill, Yifan decided to bring Baihu to the second place where the divine cauldron might be hidden. That was where the divine stone was located, Najwa Peak. No matter what, he would go and take a look first. Anyway, he had nothing to do. After all, it was just a huge rock in front of everyone. If he could see that the huge rock had traces of the divine cauldron barrier during the day, he would break the barrier at night and obtain the secret text. If the huge rock was not a divine cauldron, then he could directly go to Mount Everest at night and save a lot of time. Thinking of this, he closed his eyes and began to change his clothes with his mind. Buzz, following a burst of red light from his body, the black robe on his body instantly changed. The collar was open, the sleeves were wide, the lapels were wide, and the belt was decorated with auspicious patterns. In the blink of an eye, Yifan's black robe turned into a brown Tibetan robe. This was another magical effect of the 8 treasures of the demon realm. Not only was it invulnerable to swords and spears, it could also be changed according to the owner's will. After changing, Yifan shook his sleeves, raised his arms, and turned around a few times. He nodded with satisfaction. He deliberately made a big cotton hat on the collar of the Tibetan robe. This way, he could cover his silver hair and hide Baihu's figure. It could be said that he killed 2 birds with 1 stone. When Baihu saw that Yifan had changed his clothes, it excitedly ran in front of Yifan. It curiously looked at Yifan from head to toe. Tashi Delek, Xiao Zhao Zhao. Yifan pretended to do a Tibetan etiquette to Baihu. He called it auspicious and seemed to be very methodical. Baihu collapsed on the ground, its whole body trembling. Yifan's appearance made it unable to stand up from laughing. After an hour, a young man wearing a huge cotton hat and a Tibetan robe appeared on the mountain road of the snowy mountain. He was wearing a brown Tibetan robe with big boots. He held prayer beads in his left hand and a prayer wheel in his right hand. He looked no different from other Tibetans. He was Yifan. The leather boots, prayer wheel, and prayer beads were all bought for him by him. If he wanted to pretend, he had to pretend. Oemani Padme Hum. Oemani Padme Hum. Yifan imitated the red-clothed old lama and chanted the 6-syllable mantra. He fiddled with the prayer beads and turned the prayer wheel. With a pious face, he followed the mighty crowd to Nacho Peak. Chapter 595. Najwa Peak was not very high. Yifan, who was in the crowd of worshippers, only took 2 hours to follow the crowd to the top of the peak, the place where the red godstone was located. This red godstone was indeed different. It was more than 10 feet tall and 50 to 60 feet wide. It was smooth and red in color. Compared to the surrounding snowy mountains, it was very eye-catching. It was like a huge burning flame. Indeed, as recorded in the mysterious ancient book, within 30 feet of this huge god stone, it was completely bare stone. There was not a single snowflake. In the open space 30 feet away, there were many wooden stakes with white hatta and colorful prayer flags. Whoosh! The mountain wind blew, and the prayer flags fluttered high in the air. Whoosh! The Tibetans who came to worship knelt down at a distance of 70 feet from the god stone. They muttered to themselves and worshipped the god stone devoutly. Yifan in the crowd also knelt down. As he kowtowed, he used his senses to perceive the god stone. After a while, Yifan frowned. The ancient book was right. The aura around this god stone was indeed different. There was a huge repulsive force. It was this repulsive force that made everything within 30 feet unable to get close. It was also this repulsive force that made this huge god stone face you not fall and not be touched by the rain. Yifan, who had obtained the secret text of the three cauldrons, faintly felt that this repulsive force was not the power of the boundary. If it was the power of the boundary, it would not be limited to 30 feet. But this was only his guess. To get a definite conclusion, he had to observe further. But this god stone had become a sacred object in the hearts of the Tibetans. If he walked in front of the god stone, it would inevitably arouse the anger and dissatisfaction of the Tibetans. He had to think of another way. He looked around and carefully observed the surrounding crowd. Those Tibetans who had finished worshiping the god stone did not leave immediately after kowtowing. Instead, they sat cross-legged on the ground. As they moved the prayer beads, they closed their eyes and recited the scriptures. Seeing this, Yifan immediately pretended to sit cross-legged. He moved the prayer beads and pretended to recite the scriptures. On the surface, he looked like the other Tibetans, with his eyes closed and a pious expression on his face. In fact, he was secretly mobilizing his devil spirit and sending his primordial spirit out of his body. That's right, he wanted to use his primordial spirit to explore the red divine stone. Phew! As a circle of snowflakes and ice flowers spread out from the snowy ground where Yifan was meditating, the prayer beads in his hand suddenly stopped moving. Whoosh! Yifan, who was dressed in a black robe, walked out from his cross-legged body and slowly walked towards the divine stone. At this moment, he was already in his primordial spirit form, so ordinary people couldn't see him at all. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Yifan stopped 10 meters away from the divine stone. This was the edge of the mysterious power of the god stone. Yifan slowly extended his right index finger and gently pointed at the void in front of him. Whoosh! A red screen of light appeared in front of Yifan, and his finger just happened to touch the screen of light. Buzz! At the intersection between Yifan's finger and the red screen of light, several resplendent beams of red light shot out. This power is not small. Yifan thought to himself. As he thought, he withdrew his finger. At the same time, he mobilized the power of the heavenly demon in his primordial spirit and walked towards the red screen of light. The power of the light screen was not small, but for Yifan, who had the power of the heavenly demon, it was nothing. Dressed in a black robe, he slowly stepped into the light screen of light. Rumble! As soon as Yifan stepped into the red screen of light, the huge red divine stone began to shake violently. The snow at the top of the mountain was gradually cracked by the shaking of the ground. When the Tibetans who were devoutly worshipping the divine stone saw this, they thought that the divine stone was angry, so they immediately lowered their heads and kowtowed on the snowy ground. Yifan, who had already arrived in front of the divine stone, frowned and stopped in his tracks. The scene in front of him instantly made him dispel the idea of entering the divine stone. Obviously, this divine stone was very mysterious, but it was not the place where the cauldron was. If the cauldron was inside, he would not be able to walk in so easily. Of course, this was only one of the reasons. The more important reason was that the divine stone was shaking more and more violently. It could cause an avalanche at any time. He keenly felt that at the foot of the mountain, there was a large group of devout Tibetans rushing up the mountain. If he continued to walk towards the divine stone, the falling snow would instantly swallow them up. Thinking of this, Yi Fan began to slowly retreat. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. As Yi Fan gradually retreated, the violently shaking divine stone began to gradually calm down. When the Tibetans saw that the divine stone had stopped shaking, they all revealed a happy expression and praised. Yi Fan returned his primordial spirit to his body and slowly opened his eyes. He slowly stood up, patted the snow on his body, pulled down the huge hat, and turned to go down Najwa Mountain. At this time, his expression was somewhat dignified. Out of the 3 most likely places to hide the cauldron, 2 had been eliminated, and now only Mount Everest was left. If Mount Everest still did not have a divine cauldron, then he could only make a trip to the capital and personally ask the crown prince about the source of the news. As Yi Fan thought about it, he walked to a deserted place and used the cloud riding technique to return to the inn. After returning to his room, Yi Fan asked the waiter to prepare a large bucket of hot water for him. Then he quickly took off all his clothes and soaked in the wooden bucket with a towel wrapped around his waist. He needed the hot water to relax his tense nerves. East China Sea, Tibet. He knew that there was a divine cauldron in these 2 places, but it was as difficult as finding a needle in a haystack. When he did not have the power to break through the barrier of the divine cauldron appeared one after another. When he had the power of the sky demon and could break through the barrier of the divine cauldron was like a clay ox entering the sea, disappearing without a trace. Everything depended on his luck tonight. Yi Fan thought in his heart as he placed the towel on his face. Then, he leaned back and relaxed his tired body and mind. Only when the water in the wooden bucket was no longer warm did Yi Fan stand up from the water. He picked up the clothes on the table and walked straight behind the screen, rustling as he put on his clothes. Although Xiao Zhao was currently Baihu, she was still his recognized sister. The difference between men and women still had to be avoided. However, just as he was about to tidy up his belt and walk out from behind the screen, the scene in front of him caused his expression to change drastically as his pupils constricted. Clang! The ice dragon sword that was placed on the table was unsheathed. As it emitted a resplendent light, it slowly floated up and circled around the room, emitting a crisp sound. The ice dragon warning. Yi Fan was alarmed in his heart. Wang, the rising heat of the Li Fire sword, also separated from its scabbard and flew into the air, dragging a dazzling red light behind the ice dragon's sword as it spun incessantly. The Li Fire sword was also unsheathed. Yi Fan's face was solemn. The 2 divine weapons were warning him for the 2nd time. The last time this happened, his beloved wife, Fujiwara no Chico's soul, was taken away. Even now, her soul was still incomplete, and she was still insane. Now that the 2 divine weapons were warning him again, he didn't know what was going to happen. Yi Fan looked at the 2 divine weapons that were circling in the air, emitting a crisp sound, and his expression became even more solemn. Whoosh! Just as he was rooted to the spot, unable to understand what was going on, a black light shot out from his palm and flew into the air, joining the sword array. This black light was 4 feet and 4 inches long, 3 inches wide, and as black as ink. Black light lingered around it. It was the Blood Drinker blade. Seeing this, Yi Fan's face turned deathly pale. He slowly sat down on the wooden chair in front of the table, staring blankly and frowning. Even the demon realm's Blood Drinker dagger had flown out of his primordial spirit to warn him. What was about to happen was definitely not child's play. Baihu Xiao Zhao had never seen such a situation before, and it was her first time seeing the demon realm's divine weapon, Blood Drinker dagger. Squatting on the ground, she looked up at the 2 swords and 1 dagger, circling in the air with a look of surprise. She thought that Yi Fan was controlling the 3 divine weapons. What was going to happen? Why would the 3 divine weapons be warning him at the same time? Yi Fan couldn't figure it out, and he couldn't understand it. With his current strength, he could compete with immortals. Those experts in the world were not even worth mentioning to him. This was strange. Since his cultivation was already at the peak of perfection, what kind of danger would he be in? Yifan narrowed his eyes. He could not figure it out no matter how hard he thought. He reached out and withdrew the 3 divine weapons. Then he lay on the bed and thought hard. After thinking for a long time, Yifan suddenly sat up from the bed. Could it be that Xiao Zhao was in danger? Last time, it was his beloved wife. Could it be that this time, it was his adopted sister? It was very likely. There were only the 2 of them here. If something were to happen, it would be either him or Xiao Zhao. Yifan looked at Xiao Zhao beside him. After thinking for a moment, he sat up from the bed and took the blood demon token from his waist. Moji, Yifan said to the blood demon token in his hand, following which several tins of dazzling red lights shot out from the blood demon token, and a peerlessly beautiful woman slowly walked out of the red light. This person was none other than the leader of the demon realm's 4 protectors, Yumoji. Are you looking for me? After Yumoji appeared, she walked up to Yifan and asked in a soft and ethereal voice, "What is it?" Yifan stood up from the bed and said to Yumoji, "There's something I need your help with." "What is it?" Yumoji looked at Yifan with a pair of starry eyes and asked, "I have an important matter to attend to tonight. It could be dangerous." Yifan looked at Yumoji and said, "So, I want you to take care of Xiao Zhao for me." "Danger? What danger?" Yumoji immediately frowned upon hearing Yifan's words. She didn't understand what could pose a threat to Yifan with his current cultivation base and status. "The 3 divine weapons are warning me. I have to be on guard," Yifan said to Yumoji. "You don't need to ask too many questions. Just take care of Xiao Zhao for me," Yifan said as he turned around to look at Xiao Zhao. "Woo!" Baihu immediately whimpered in protest upon hearing that Yifan wanted to take the risk alone. "The 3 divine weapons are warning you?" Yumoji frowned and asked, "Is that so?" As the leader of the 4 guardians of the Devil Realm, she knew about Yifan's Frost Dragon Sword and Everfire Sword. It was indeed unusual for the 2 divine swords and the Devil Realm's Blood Drinker to be unsheathed at the same time. "It just happened," Yifan said. Yumoji's expression changed. She could sense the seriousness of the matter. "I'll leave Xiao Zhao with you first. If I don't return by tomorrow morning, bring her back to the Devil Realm and wait for me," Yifan said to Yumoji. "Remember, don't tell anyone else about this, not even the Devil Lord. Do you understand?" As long as Xiao Zhao returned to the Devil Realm, she would be absolutely safe. This would make him feel at ease. "What about you?" Yumoji asked Yifan anxiously. "What about you?" "Don't worry, I know what to do," Yifan replied. But Yumoji was worried about Yifan's safety. She wanted Yifan to think twice before acting. "No buts, just do as I say." Yifan looked at Yumoji with a firm gaze and said, "Then I." Yumoji nodded. Yifan was the Devil Realm's Devil Lord. She had to obey his orders. "Woo-woo." Baihu whimpered as it spun around Yifan's feet. It understood the conversation between the 2, and, for the first time, it understood what a divine weapon was. The 3 divine weapons circling in the air were not controlled by Yifan. They were unsheathed as a warning. "Xiao Zhao, be good." Yifan picked up Baihu and stroked Baihu's head. He said gently, "I've already lost Chico. I can't lose you as well. Be good and listen to Sister Baihu. I'll come find you when the time comes." Chapter 596. In the blink of an eye, it was already nighttime. Yifan in a black robe reached out and extinguished the candle on the table. Using his movement technique, he turned into a ray of bright green light, snaking out of the window and straight into the sky. High up in the sky, the stars were shining and the moon was shining brightly. Under the stars and the moon, Yifan stepped on the auspicious clouds. With a dignified expression, he quickly flew in the direction of Mount Everest. He didn't know whether this trip to Mount Everest would be a good or bad thing. Who cares, as long as there is a possibility of a divine cauldron, not to mention a divine mountain that an eagle cannot fly over, even if it is a dragon's lair, a tiger's den, a mountain of swords, or a sea of fire. He will still try. Knowing that there is a tiger in the mountain, he will still go there, no matter what dangers await him ahead. He will not turn back. Those who block me will be killed without mercy. Yi Fan thought in his heart, and a red light flashed in his eyes. He pushed the auspicious clouds under his feet to the extreme, whistling as he moved forward. Mount Everest was very far from the inn where he was staying. It was 1,000 miles away. If he used the demonic spirit or the spiritual energy in his sea of chi to use his movement technique, he would only need a moment to reach it. However, he did not do so. The warning of the 3 divine weapons made him a little worried. He must conserve his strength now, and it was best not to use his spiritual energy where he could. As the saying goes, good steel should be used on the edge of the blade. In case he met an expert who could match him, the depth of his spiritual energy often determined the outcome of the battle. He had the cloud riding technique that could fly like the wind without the use of spiritual energy, so he naturally would not use his own spiritual energy. After half an hour, Mount Everest that reached the sky came into his sight. This Mount Everest was indeed very tall, almost 3,000 feet, but compared to the height of Yi Fan's auspicious clouds, it still paled in comparison. Yi Fan slowed down the speed of the auspicious clouds and let the auspicious clouds hover above the peak of Mount Everest. Focusing his eyes, he looked down. As the saying goes, caution is the parent of safety. Since the divine weapons warned him, he must be extremely cautious and be very careful. At this moment, it was already late at night. Coupled with the vile weather and bone-piercing cold winds in this place of ice and snow, there was simply no one who would stay here. Yi Fan checked it carefully several times before he felt relieved. So far, everything was going well. As he thought to himself, he urged the auspicious clouds under his feet to descend slowly while circling the mountain wall of Mount Everest. While coiling down, Yi Fan mobilized all his senses and carefully observed every inch of the icy surface of Mount Everest. Not only that, in order to prevent himself from being careless and missing the divine cauldron, Yi Fan also mobilized 20% of the spiritual chi in his chi sea and extended it to the top of Mount Everest. This way, if he were to touch the barrier of the divine cauldron, the spirit energy would definitely be rebounded, and he would be the first to notice it. Whoosh! With a thought from Yi Fan, red, purple, white, gold, and green lights of different colors shot out from his body and went straight to the top of Mount Everest, forming a 5-colored spot of light that was more than 10 feet in size. Yi Fan used his keen 5 senses to carefully detect the signs of the divine cauldron while constantly probing with his powerful spiritual chi. He slowly coiled down the mountain. After an hour, his figure had descended to the mountainside of Mount Everest, and he was more than 1,000 feet away from the top of Mount Everest. Everything was going well, and there was no danger. However, Yi Fan's brows furrowed slightly. Since there was no danger on his side, then the one in danger must be Xiao Zhao. Otherwise, the divine weapon would not be unsheathed for no reason. Xiao Zhao was now with Yumoji, and they were staying in another room in the inn. As a precaution, Yi Fan set up 2 powerful barriers in the entire room. He had instructed Yumoji to immediately bring Xiao Zhao to the Devil Realm if she sensed any movement in the barrier, or if he did not return by tomorrow morning, and not to fight with the enemy. The Devil Realm was guarded by the Devil Lord and the army of the Devil Realm. It was the safest place. He had decided that after he finished searching Mount Everest, he would immediately rush back to the inn. Buzz! Just as Yi Fan was deep in thought, the 5-colored brilliance around his body automatically retracted from the mountain and returned to his body. Whoosh! At the same time, the large group of auspicious clouds that had gathered under his feet and supported his body began to lose its ability to lift and slowly disperse. The scene in front of him made Yi Fan, who was high up in the sky, narrow his eyes instantly. It was a Buddhist Saraira. Someone had brought a Buddhist Saraira here. Buzz! Just as Yi Fan was in shock, an unbearable headache invaded his head again. Arg! Yi Fan, who was on the auspicious clouds, covered his head with both hands and groaned in pain. Swoosh! The bright green swastika on Yi Fan's forehead began to lose its green glow and was replaced by a red glow. His eyes turned blood red in the blink of an eye. Arg, arg. Yi Fan tore at his hair in pain, and his voice was male and female. However, all of this was not over yet. The red light of the swastika only appeared for a moment, and then it began to fade away gradually, becoming dim and lifeless. Yi Fan's pair of blood-red eyes also gradually returned to the color of a normal person's eyes. At this time, the spiritual power in his body was suppressed, and the power of the heavenly demon was sealed. Even the cloud riding technique had lost its effect. Phew! As the auspicious clouds below his feet completely dispersed, Yi Fan's body fell from the sky. Just like the time in the snowy mountains, Yi Fan, who was suffering from a splitting headache, tried his best to stimulate the spiritual power in his dantian and control his body's balance. Although the spiritual power in his dantian was sealed in his body, it could still circulate in his body. After being stimulated by Yi Fan, the five-colored spiritual power rushed to the surface of Yi Fan's body and slowed down Yi Fan's falling speed. He who was wrapped in the five-colored light slowly descended from the sky to the ground. Yi Fan, who was in pain, tried his best to keep his mind clear. While urging his spiritual power to reduce his speed, he pulled out the cold dragon sword from its scabbard. Obviously, someone was using the Buddhist power of the Buddhist Sarira to suppress his heavenly demon power and spiritual power. They had achieved an ulterior motive. At this time, other than the ice and fire cores, he only had 3 divine weapons: the cold dragon sword, the distant fire sword, and the blood-drinking knife. However, this place was a frozen ice mountain, and the distant fire sword was a divine weapon of fire. Without the activation of spiritual power, part of the distant fire sword's heat would be offset, and it would not be able to display its true power. As for the blood-drinking knife, it was even more impossible. This knife was a treasure of the devil realm, and was wrapped in a devil spirit. The Buddhist power in the Sarira was its nemesis. The cold dragon sword was overflowing with cold energy, which was suitable for the cold conditions here. Clang! The cold dragon was unsheathed, and a bright white light shone. With the cold dragon in hand, Yi Fan vigilantly observed the movements below. At the foot of Mount Everest, 2 Tibetans were looking up at the sky with smiles on their faces. One of them looked to be in his 50s. He wore a red monk's robe and a yellow llama's hat. He held a prayer bead in his hand and had a sinister expression. The other person was tall and sturdy. His body was like an iron tower. He wore an earth-colored Tibetan robe and had a mocking expression on his face. When Yi Fan saw this, he was so angry that the roots of his teeth itched. That tall Tibetan was none other than the Tibetan who had scolded the innkeeper in the inn. So it was him who did it. I should have killed him back then. Yi Fan thought in his heart, and the long sword in his hand suddenly slashed downwards. Whoosh! A 10-meter-long white arc of light instantly shot forth from the glacial dragon sword, hurtling toward the ground with a whoosh. Currently, the cold dragon sword had already obtained 4 of the 9 scabbards, and the seal had been removed by half. Although Yi Fan did not activate it with his spiritual power, its power was not inferior to before. The arc of light was like lightning as it descended from the sky. The 2 Tibetans on the ground were stunned when they saw the arc of light. Then, their expressions changed, and they quickly retreated. Whoosh! The 2 of them had just left their original spot when the huge arc of light from the cold dragon sword rushed into the snow. Boom! A loud sound was heard. Snowflakes flew everywhere, and cold air filled the air. On the rugged surface of the ice, a huge ice trench about 10 feet long and 3 feet wide suddenly appeared. What a powerful cold dragon sword! The red-clothed llama, who had retreated 30 feet away, exclaimed. If Yi Fan was not in the air and thousands of feet above the ground, the attack just now would have killed the 2 of them. Master, quick! The pale-faced Tibetan in the earth-colored robe hurriedly said to the red-clothed llama. Think of a way to stop him. The red-clothed llama nodded. He stretched out his hand and took out a golden object from his bosom. The object was less than 3 inches in size. It was in the shape of an alms bowl. It was enveloped in golden light and filled with auspicious air. It looked like a golden wine cup. The red-clothed llama held the object in the palm of his right hand. Then, he raised his left hand and closed his eyes. He muttered a spell. But as the red-clothed llama chanted faster and faster, the golden alms bowl in his palm suddenly enlarged to 9 inches in size. The golden light was dazzling. After the alms bowl enlarged, the red-clothed llama stopped chanting. He suddenly opened his eyes and pointed the alms bowl in his hand at Yi Fan, who was swaying in the air. "Pa!" The red-clothed llama held the alms bowl with his right hand and slapped the body of the alms bowl with his left hand. Whoosh, 10,000 rays of golden light shot out from the alms bowl and formed a huge golden light shield. It shot directly at Yi Fan, who was like a fallen leaf in the air. At this moment, Yi Fan, who was suffering from a splitting headache, was adjusting his body and balancing his center of gravity. He was ready to attack the 2 people on the ground again. Who would have thought that before he could stabilize himself, tens of thousands of golden rays of light shot towards him from the ground in an overwhelming manner. He only felt that his head was about to explode. Whoosh, 10,000 rays of golden light formed a huge light shield that instantly enveloped Yi Fan. Then it suddenly closed. Yi Fan only felt a huge suction force sucking him in. He couldn't move at all. He couldn't even activate the ice and fire Niden in his body. At this moment, he finally understood why the 3 divine weapons had been unsheathed. He also finally understood who the person who had sneaked into his room was. The person in the earth-colored Tibetan robe knew that he would come to Mount Everest in advance. He must have secretly looked at the mysterious ancient book that he had placed on the wooden table in his room. He didn't expect that the 3 marks he had made on the ancient book would harm him. Yi Fan was filled with regret. The golden light shield was getting tighter and tighter. Coupled with the bone-piercing pain, Yi Fan's vision became darker and darker. Gradually, he lost consciousness. Seeing that Yi Fan had fainted, the red-clothed llama chanted the spell again. Whoosh, the golden light shield that had enveloped Yi Fan instantly retracted and flew back into the alms bowl. "Master, your golden Buddha alms bowl is indeed powerful. Even the frost dragon sword is no match for it." The tall Tibetan in the earth-colored Tibetan robe said to the red-clothed llama in amazement. "The 9 scabbards of the frost dragon sword have yet to be completed. Of course, it's no match for my golden alms bowl." The red-clothed llama looked at the golden alms bowl and said, "If the frost dragon sword is unsealed, even 10 golden alms bowls won't be its match. Master, now that we've subdued this demon, what do we do next?" The tall Tibetan asked again. "Spread the news. In 10 days, we'll hold a demon-slaying conference and execute the demon in public." As the old lama spoke, a trace of pride appeared on his face. "Let those who had a grudge against Eldritch come and see. Those who have a grudge against him will have their revenge. Those who don't have a grudge will have their hatred resolved." Chapter 597. Inside the inn, Yumoji, who was dressed in purple, held Baihu in her arms as she stood by the window, patiently waiting for Yi Fan's return. He was the ruler of the devil realm and possessed the power of the heavenly demons. His cultivation was already at the peak of perfection, and he had 3 divine weapons with him. This trip to Mount Everest should not be dangerous. Yumoji thought to herself. It would not be long before Yi Fan appeared out of thin air in this room and greeted them with a smile. Baihu Zhao curled up in Yumoji's arms as her clear eyes kept looking out of the window, eagerly waiting for Yi Fan's figure to appear. For some reason, she had a feeling that Yi Fan's trip this time would be dangerous, even though she knew that Yi Fan's cultivation was not what it used to be. The woman and the fox had their own thoughts as they waited for the safe return of their beloved man. Just as they were waiting patiently, the whole room suddenly flashed with 5 colors and disappeared in an instant. The spiritual barrier that Yi Fan set up before he left had disappeared. The scene in front of her made the beautiful Yumoji's expression change drastically as her pupils shrank. Something had happened to Yi Fan. Yumoji was shocked. Things had really happened as he had predicted. With a shocked expression, she quickly took the blood demon token that Yi Fan had left her and carefully observed it. The blood demon token was still glowing red, but it was not as dazzling as before. The bright red light had dimmed a lot, but it did not disappear. The spiritual barrier had disappeared, and the brilliance of the blood demon token had dimmed. These two phenomena could only mean one thing. Yi Fan was restrained by someone, but he was not dead yet. She knew that if Yi Fan was dead, the blood demon token that she held in her hand, which symbolized Yi Fan's position in the devil realm, would instantly lose its luster. Who exactly did Yi Fan meet that even the power of the heavenly demons could not compete with? Yumoji frowned as she thought hard. She wanted to go to Mount Everest in person, but on second thought, she immediately dismissed the idea. It was a foolish decision. Even Yi Fan, who was the ruler of the demon realm and wielded the power of the heavenly demons, was no match for him. If he rashly went there, wouldn't he be courting death for nothing? The current plan was to follow what Yi Fan had told her before he left and bring Xiao Zhao back to the devil realm. Otherwise, it was very likely that the other party would come to this in to capture Xiao Zhao. Having made up her mind, Yumoji waved her sleeves at the empty space in the room. Whoosh! Purple light flashed in the air, and a dazzling purple door appeared out of thin air. The door was 7 feet tall and 3 feet wide. It was surrounded by a purple aura and was flowing with brilliance. Its design was exceptionally gorgeous. When Yumoji saw that the door to the devil realm had opened, she immediately stepped through the door. After Yumoji entered with Baihu in her arms, the dazzling purple door closed and vanished into thin air. Clang! In less than 10 minutes after the purple door closed, the wooden door of the room was kicked open from the outside. A red-clothed llama with a sinister look on his face walked in with large strides. He carried the alms bowl in his right hand and the waiter's collar with his left hand, as if he was carrying a chicken. Where is he? The red-clothed llama with the golden alms bowl saw that there was no one in the room. He angrily asked the waiter in his hand, Just now here." The ashen-faced waiter was so scared that he was trembling like a sieve and stammered. "Scram!" The red-clothed llama pushed the waiter in his hand away and shouted angrily. The waiter, who fell to the ground, endured the pain and staggered up from the ground. He then ran downstairs in fear. "You guys ran fast." The red-clothed llama looked around the empty room and muttered to himself. After that, he waved his monk robe and walked out of the room. Whoosh! In front of the devil realm's entrance, Yumoji, who was carrying Baihu, appeared out of thin air. "Greetings, Guardian Yu." Seeing that Yumoji, the leader of the devil realm's 4 guardians, had suddenly appeared, the inner monkey and Ima, who were guarding the entrance, immediately knelt on one knee and bowed to Yumoji. Yumoji nodded and walked toward the entrance. "Guardian Yu, please wait." The inner monkey raised his head and respectfully said to Yumoji. Yumoji, who was already in front of the devil realm's entrance, frowned and turned to look at the inner monkey. "What is it?" Yumoji asked. "Protector Yu, please leave the white fox outside the door," the heart ape said to Yumoji. "Protector Yu knows the rules of the demon realm. Those who are not of the demon realm are not allowed to enter. Protector Yu, please understand our difficulties as your subordinates." The inner monkey lowered his head as he spoke. "Do you know who this Baihu is?" Yumoji coldly asked the inner monkey. "I don't know." The inner monkey, who was still kneeling on one knee, answered respectfully. "She is Xiao Zhao, the new Devil King's sworn sister." "Why? Am I not allowed to enter?" Yumoji asked. The inner monkey and Ima's expressions changed when they heard Yumoji's words. They instinctively looked at each other. Yumoji turned around and prepared to enter again. "Protector Yu, please wait." Ima, who had been kneeling there with his head lowered, said to Yumoji, "It's not that I want to make things difficult for Protector Yu, but there are rules in the devil realm. Those who are not from the devil realm must have the devil lords or the devil realm's token to enter the devil realm. Other than that, no one is allowed to enter. Please don't make things difficult for us." He was right. The devil realm was not a place that could be entered and exited as one wished. If an outsider wanted to enter, they must have the devil lords or devil king's orders or pass to enter. The Devil Lord's verbal orders were usually conveyed by the Devil Lord's special envoy, the Flame Devil Lord. Even though Yi Fan was already the ruler of the Devil World, he had left in a hurry and did not tell them who his Devil Lord's special envoy was. As such, unless Yi Fan personally gave the order, the two of them would definitely not dare to let outsiders enter the Devil World. Yumoji frowned when she heard Ima's words. She took out the Blood Devil token. You recognize this token, right? Yumoji asked as she turned around and placed the Blood Devil token in front of the two of them. When the two of them saw it, their expressions changed drastically. We greet the Devil King. The two of them said in unison and bowed respectfully to the Blood Devil token in Yumoji's hand. They did not expect Yumoji to have Yi Fan's Devil King's token. The Blood Devil token. Seeing the Blood Devil token is equivalent to seeing the Devil King. Yumoji said to the two of them, I now command you with this Blood Devil token to let this Baihu enter the Devil Realm. Do you hear me? We obey the Devil King's order. Ima replied in unison. They quickly got up and slowly opened the Black Gate to the Devil Realm on both sides. If it was someone else from the Devil Realm who was returning, there was no need to open the gate to the Devil Realm. They could just use the token to enter as their primordial spirit. However, this time, Yumoji had the Devil King's token, the Blood Devil token. Yumoji was right. Seeing the Blood Devil token was equivalent to seeing the Devil King. No matter how bold they would not be so rude as to not open the gate. Yumoji kept the Blood Devil token and walked into the Devil Realm expressionlessly. I say, Old Ma, what's wrong with us brothers recently? Why are we always so unlucky? After closing the gate, Ima asked the tall and long-faced Ima. Last time, we offended the Devil King of the Devil Realm. This time, we offended Guardian Yu. What's wrong with us? Is there something wrong with the feng shui? Or is it just a bad year? Huh? You're wrong, Old Ma. Ima smiled bitterly and shook his head. This time, we didn't just offend Guardian Yu. That Baihu in her arms, the Devil King's sworn sister, we also offended her. But we didn't do anything wrong. Ima felt a little wronged. So what? This is fate. Sigh. Ima sighed. I didn't expect the Devil King to give the Blood Devil token to Guardian Yu. Their relationship is definitely not ordinary. Ima shook his head and smiled bitterly. Drip, drip, the sound of water dripping could be heard. Yi Fan, who was dressed in a black robe, slowly opened his eyes. He slowly sat up from the ground and looked around. The sun was shining brightly, the bamboo forest was green, and the ancient well was still there. A gentle breeze blew, and the bamboo leaves rustled. He returned to the bamboo forest. What's wrong this time? A familiar voice sounded from afar. Yi Fan, who was dressed in white, slowly walked out from the depths of the bamboo forest and stopped in front of Yi Fan. Yi Fan slowly stood up from the ground and patted the dust off his hands as he asked Yi Fan, What? You don't know. The white-robed Yi Fan smiled and shook his head slowly. Didn't you say that you're a part of me? Don't you know everything about me, like the back of your hand? Yi Fan asked his other self. What? You can't sense it anymore? No. Yi Fan began to imitate what Yi Fan had said to him that day in the bamboo forest. I don't do it, but it doesn't mean I can't. As he spoke, he slowly walked toward the empty space behind Yi Fan. Yi Fan frowned and turned around to look at Yi Fan. Yi Fan stopped in his tracks and waved his hand in the air in front of him. Buzz. With a flash of white light in front of him, a round stone table 3 feet in size instantly appeared. The stone table was simple and unadorned. 2 stone stools were placed on the left and right sides. There was a stone tea tray on the stone table. On the tray, there was a stone pot and several stone cups. Why? Yi Fan asked. Didn't you say to me that day, let me obediently live my peaceful days in this bamboo forest? As the white-robed Yi Fan spoke, his white robes fluttered and he sat down on the stone bench in front of him. Then, he took out a stone cup from the tea tray and placed it on the table. He lifted the stone pot and slowly poured tea into the cup. Listen to people's advice and eat your fill. Right now, I don't care about anything and am very peaceful. Yi Fan said with a smile as he picked up the stone cup and took a sip of tea. Yifan was speechless at his other self's words. He turned around and shaded his eyes with his hand. He looked around, intending to find a way out. But what made him feel despair was that there was only bamboo forest here. How can I get out? Yifan tilted his head and asked Yifan. Good tea, really good tea. Yifan praised as he placed the stone cup on the table. He didn't seem to hear Yifan's question. How can I get out? Yifan was angered by his other self's arrogant attitude and asked again in a loud voice. Yifan continued to ignore him. He picked up the teapot and continued to pour tea for himself. I'm asking you a question. Yifan saw that Yifan was ignoring him and immediately became angry. He took a few steps in front of Yifan and reached out to grab his collar. But when his hand reached a foot in front of Yifan, he couldn't get any closer. Yifan was drinking tea with a smile on his face. He slowly drank his tea. Yifan continued to exert strength but still couldn't get close to him. What's wrong? Is the power of the heavenly demon useless? The white-robed Yifan, who was holding the stone cup in his hand, raised his gaze and looked at Yifan. Bang! A formless energy instantly shot out from the white-robed Yifan's eyes and sent the powerless Yifan flying backward. Boom! Yifan flew into the depths of the bamboo forest like a kite with a broken string. Kacha! Kacha! Chapter 598. After a long time, the dust-covered Yifan finally stood up shakily from the ground. He first shook his dizzy head, then staggered out of the bamboo forest. He staggered to the front of the stone table, reached out his hand to support himself on the stone table, and sat down on the stone stool opposite the white-robed Yifan. What's wrong? Are you awake? The white-robed Yifan leisurely asked Yifan as he drank tea. Yifan did not answer. He took out a cup from the tea tray on the stone table and filled the teapot to the brim. Then he gulped down the tea. The white-robed Yifan calmly looked at him with a smile. How can I get out? Yifan panted heavily as he placed the stone cup on the stone table. He then raised his head to look at the white-robed Yifan and asked, You are currently inside the golden alms bowl, and your cultivation is completely suppressed. If you go out, you will only suffer. It would be better for you to recuperate in this bamboo forest, the white-robed Yifan said as he picked up the stone pot to refill Yifan's empty cup. What? I'm inside the golden alms bowl? Yifan was shocked when he heard this. That's right. The white-robed Yifan put down the stone pot and calmly said, Your body is currently trapped by the red-robed llama's golden alms bowl. There is no way for you to escape. Who is that red-robed llama? Why does he want to pose me? What exactly is that golden alms bowl in his hand? How can it be so powerful? Yifan composed himself and frowned as he asked the white-robed Yifan. I don't know who that red-robed llama is, but he should be an enemy from your previous life. The white-robed Yifan replied with a smile. As for the golden alms bowl in his hand, I have some impression of it. Yifan narrowed his eyes and looked at the white-robed Yifan, indicating for him to continue speaking. That alms bowl is called the Golden Buddha Treasure Alms Bowl. It is a treasure passed down by generations of Dharmarajas. Together with the demons subduing Pestle in the Golden Wheel Temple and the swastika Buddha seal in the Great Peacock Monastery, they are known as the three great secret treasures of Tibet, the white-robed Yifan said. It is said that the Golden Buddha Treasure Alms Bowl is inscribed with a supreme Buddhist mantra. It is also inlaid with the relics of the Dharmarajas. Its Buddhist power is boundless and can subdue all demons. Your sky demon power is suppressed by it. The Golden Buddha Treasure Bowl passed down by generations of Dharmarajas. After Yifan heard this, he immediately frowned. That is to say, this item was passed down to him by the Golden Rock Phawang? Is he the new living Buddha Dharma King of Tibet? How is this possible? How can it be so easy to find a reincarnated living Buddha? The white-robed Yifan said with a smile. Furthermore, that red-robed Lama has an evil face and is filled with anger. How could he be the new Dharmaraja? If that is the case, then how did the Golden Alms Bowl end up in his hands? Yifan muttered to himself. Then I'm not sure. The white-robed Yifan picked up his teacup and gently sipped his tea. Is there any way to escape from this golden alms bowl? Yifan looked at the white-robed Yifan and asked. Of course there is. The white-robed Yifan replied. What is it? Yifan hurriedly asked. Although this golden alms bowl has boundless Buddhist power, it is only used to subdue demons. The white-robed Yifan leaned forward and looked into Yifan's eyes. He smiled and said, as long as you can get rid of the demons and evil in your body, you will naturally be able to escape from the golden alms bowl suppression. However, can you do it? After hearing this, Yifan fell silent. He was born with the powerful evil aura left behind from his previous life. Furthermore, Cui Zuan had broken one of the 3 seals that were suppressing his evil aura. After entering the blood demon pool, he had become the ruler of the demon realm and possessed the power of the heavenly demons. It could be said that his evil aura was overwhelming and his demonic intent was boundless. It was easier said than done to get rid of both. When he thought of this, Yifan frowned. You don't need to worry about the golden alms bowl. That llama will release you. The white-robed Yifan saw his frown and said with a smile, You will let me out? Yifan asked in astonishment when he heard what he said. If he doesn't release you, how will he participate in the demon exorcism conference? How will he tear you to pieces? The white-robed Yifan asked with a smile. Demon exorcism conference? Yifan was slightly shocked. He didn't expect that the old llama would make such a big fuss in order to kill him. That old llama seems to have a deep grudge with you from your previous life. Not only does he want to kill you, but he also wants to ruin your reputation. The white-robed Yifan said with a smile, He has already spread the news that the demon exorcism conference will be held in 10 days. In front of your enemies from your previous life, he will cut off your flesh and destroy your body and soul. If that's the case, I will die in a big way. Yifan said as he raised the stone cup to his lips and took a sip. What? Aren't you worried about yourself? The white-robed Yifan asked with a smile. What do I have to worry about? Yifan put down the stone cup and stared at the white-robed Yifan with a smile, as if nothing had happened. Aren't you afraid of death? The white-robed Yifan asked with raised eyebrows when he saw that he didn't seem to care. With you here, how can I die? Yifan smiled at the white-robed Yifan and said, Isn't your duty to protect my body? This time, he wants to cut off my flesh and cut off my bones. You can't just sit by and watch, right? The white-robed Yifan frowned, and the smile on his face disappeared. Seeing that the other party was stumped by his question, a trace of pride appeared on Yifan's face. On the surface, he pretended to be relaxed, but in reality, he was extremely anxious. He was trying to provoke the white-robed Yifan into telling him the way to escape. The golden Buddha precious bowl, the enemies from his previous life, and himself who had lost all of his strength. He couldn't imagine what kind of situation it would be. He wasn't afraid of death. What he was afraid of was who would save the woman he loved after he died. Who would save his adopted sister, Xiao Zhao? You're right. I am indeed in charge of protecting your body. The white-robed Yifan's lips suddenly curved, and he said with a smile, However, your primordial spirit is not under my control. If that llama wants to use the golden alms bowl to collect your soul and primordial spirit, there's nothing I can do to help. So you're saying that I won't be able to escape this time? Yifan raised his eyebrows and asked the white-robed Yifan, This is your tribulation. If you can get through it, you will soar to the heavens. If you can't, your soul will scatter. The white-robed Yifan stopped smiling and said calmly, Everything will depend on your luck. Yifan fell in a deep thought. He couldn't resign himself to fate. Before the demon-slaying conference, he had to think of a way. In the demon realm, Yumoji, who was carrying Baihu in her arms, hurried toward the heavenly devil palace. She was the leader of the demon realm's 4 guardians and had just returned from the human world. According to the rules, she had to meet with the demon realm's sovereign Tenmoni as soon as possible. Her meeting with him was secondary. More importantly, she had to report the matter of Yifan being trapped to the demon lord. Although she had already promised Yifan that she wouldn't report this matter to the demon lord, she was shaken by the news. In Yifan's past life, she had given her body to him. No matter what, she had to find a way to save him, no matter the cost. The only thing she could do now was to report this matter to the demon lord as soon as possible so that he could think of a way to save her beloved. Stepping on a golden floor, she hurriedly arrived at the entrance of the heavenly devil palace. "Greetings, Lady Moji." The two guards in front of the gate immediately knelt on one knee and saluted Umoji when they saw her. "Is the demon lord in the palace?" Umoji asked the two guards. "Lady Moji, the demon lord is holding a banquet for the demon lord." One of the guards raised his head and said to Umoji, "The demon lord is here?" Umoji asked with a frown. "Yes," the guard general replied. Umoji nodded slowly. The demon lord was the new ruler of the demon realm. It was said that his cultivation base was extremely high, even higher than the previous demon lord. He must have come to the demon realm this time to express his goodwill to the demon lord. After all, 1,200 years ago, the previous demon lord had joined forces with the ghost realm to attack the demon realm. "Lady Moji, do you want me to report this to him?" The guard general asked Umoji respectfully. The two of them were able to become the guards of the heavenly devil palace because of Umoji's wisdom and recommendation. As such, the two of them were naturally grateful to Umoji and were extremely respectful. "No need." Umoji waved her hand and said, "When you see the demon lord again, remember to report this to him for me." The demon lord's visit was an important matter. Even if she was the leader of the four guardians, she could not disturb him. Speaking of which, even if she saw the demon lord now, she could not mention this in front of him. The new ruler of the demon realm was restrained in the human realm. This was not a pleasant thing to say. If the demon lord heard about this, wouldn't it be a disgrace to the demon lord? Umoji thought to herself as she turned around and returned to her crystal pavilion. However, when she arrived at the entrance of the crystal pavilion, she was surprised to see the white-robed Yenmoji standing at the entrance of her palace, looking at her with a smile. "Guardian Yen?" Umoji, who was carrying Baihu, descended from the sky with a puzzled expression. "Didn't you accompany the demon lord to greet the demon lord?" "The demon lord already knew when you returned to the demon realm." The white-robed Yenmoji smiled and said to Umoji, "The demon lord can't leave now, so he specially ordered me to come and tell you that the demon lord's calamity is a predestined fate. It is fated in the previous life and cannot be avoided. 10 days later, the demon lord will be freed from his suffering." 10 days later, the demon lord will be freed from his suffering? Umoji's eyes lit up as she asked in surprise. "This is what the demon lord said himself. How can it be false?" Yenmoji smiled. Umoji's face was filled with joy, as if a rock had been lifted from her heart. The demon lord was indeed a prophet. He had predicted Yi Fan's calamity in advance. Since he said so, it must be true. Yi Fan would definitely be able to turn the calamity into a blessing. Thinking that Yi Fan would be freed from his suffering in 10 days, Umoji's face lit up with a bright smile. "How is it? Are you relieved now?" Yenmoji asked with a smile. Umoji's face turned red as she smiled. "Take the demon lord's sworn sister to rest first. After 10 days, everything will be clear." Yenmoji smiled at Umoji. "Okay." Umoji nodded. "Now that the matter is settled, I should return to the heavenly devil palace to greet the demon lord. Guardian Yu, I'll take my leave first," Yenmoji said as his body slowly floated away from the ground. "Thank you, Guardian Yen." Umoji expressed her gratitude to Yenmoji, who was floating in midair. Chapter 599. On the warship on the coast of the East China Sea. It was noon. What? The demon-slaying conference? In the cabin, Matsumoto Takeyoshi, who was dressed in gray, was so shocked by the news that his expression changed. "Yes, my lord," said the ninja in white, who was kneeling on one knee in front of Matsumoto Takeyoshi with a saber on his back and a veil covering his face. "Is this news true?" Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked the ninja. "I've checked it from many sources, and it's absolutely true." The ninja in white raised his head and replied, "Now, this matter has spread all over the world, and everyone knows about it. When will this demon-slaying conference begin, and where will it be held? Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked with a frown. 10 days later, at Ganlu Temple, Feishua Peak, Tibet, the ninja in white replied. Which master subdued Yi Fan? Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked again. Golden Rock Fuang's junior brother, the abbot of Ganlu Temple, Gesang Doji, the ninja in white replied. Gesang Doji? Matsumoto Takeyoshi muttered to himself as he searched for the name in his mind. Matsumoto Takeyoshi had long memorized the masters of the great Ming dynasty's cultivation base. However, the name Gesang Doji was not on the list of masters. Is this person's cultivation base very high? He can subdue Yi Fan? Matsumoto Takeyoshi looked up at the ninja in white. According to my investigation, this Gesang Doji's cultivation base is average, and there's nothing extraordinary about him, the ninja in white replied. The reason he was able to subdue Mr. Yi was because of a treasure in his hands. Treasure? What treasure? Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked. The Golden Buddha Treasure Bowl, the ninja replied. The Golden Buddha Treasure Bowl? You mean the Golden Buddha Treasure Bowl, one of the 3 secret weapons in Tibet? Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked with a frown. That's right, the ninja replied. No wonder. Matsumoto Takeyoshi nodded slowly. It was said that the Golden Buddha Precious Alms Bowl was carved with golden Buddha statues and embedded with relics. Its magic power was boundless and could subdue 10,000 demons. As the saying goes, everything has its vanquisher. Yi Fan had fallen into the demonic path, so he was naturally no match for the Golden Alms Bowl. Matsumoto Takeyoshi waved his hand and said to the ninja in white, I understand. You can go and rest now. This subordinate will take his leave. The white-clothed ninja bowed his head to Matsumoto Takeyoshi and retreated. Who would have thought that the arrogant and unruly Yi Fan would actually be defeated by a nobody? After the ninja in white left, Matsumoto Takeyoshi sat on the futon and poured tea as he spoke to the man in white standing behind him. The Golden Buddha Treasure Bowl is really powerful, the man in white said with a frown. Buddhism is the nemesis of demons. Since he has fallen into the demonic path, naturally he is no match for the Golden Alms Bowl. Matsumoto Takeyoshi put down the teapot and said, What I am interested in is why Yi Fan went to Mount Everest in Tibet. As he spoke, he lifted the teacup to his mouth and gently blew on it. What do you mean? The man in white asked. He seemed to understand Matsumoto Takeyoshi's meaning. If I didn't guess wrong, he must have found a trace of the divine cauldron on Mount Everest. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone there. Matsumoto Takeyoshi took a sip of tea and said. The man in white slowly nodded. Yi Fan only had one thing to do now, and that was to find the divine cauldron. Since he appeared in Mount Everest, he must have found the clue of the divine cauldron. Mr. Matsumoto, what are we going to do now? The man in white asked Matsumoto Takeyoshi. I would like to see this demon-slaying conference with my own eyes. Matsumoto Takeyoshi put down the teacup, stood up from the futon, and stretched lazily. Are you going to bed in person? The man in white asked Matsumoto Takeyoshi. That's what I was thinking, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said. He walked slowly to the window of the berth cabin, stretched out his hand to open the porthole, and looked out. This is too dangerous. I hope you will think twice. The man in white said to Matsumoto Takeyoshi, the news of the demon-slaying conference has spread all over Jianghu. Eldritch's enemies in his last life will inevitably gather at the Sweet Dew Temple. Those who have a grudge against Eldritch must be top masters with profound cultivation. In addition, Yagyu Inosuk is also likely to go there. Black and white are in a mess. If you go there rashly, I'm afraid it will be bad for you. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Matsumoto Takeyoshi looked out of the porthole at the vast sea and said with a smile, Since Eldritch's enemies will gather at the Sweet Dew Temple, I have to go and have a look. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. In this demon-slaying conference, we may be able to make friends with some top masters who have a grudge against Eldritch, so that they can be of use to me in the future. As for Yagyu Inosuk, he may appear, but he will definitely not fight with me. You know, Tibet is an important place for Buddhism. No matter how stupid he is, He will not mess around in the holy land of other countries. Matsumoto Takeyoshi's words made the man in white admire him. This person was not only meticulous in thinking and reasoning, but also could seize the opportunity that was beneficial to him in any situation and decisively take action. With this kind of wisdom, it would be difficult for him not to achieve great things. On the other hand, we also have to take this opportunity to find the trace of the sacred tripod on Mount Everest and take action before others find it. Matsumoto Takeyoshi continued, "This matter can be handed over to others. Why do you have to go personally?" The man in white said, "There is an old saying in the great Ming dynasty, which is to be polite to the wise." Matsumoto Takeyoshi turned around with a smile and looked at the man in white. "I will personally recruit the wise to show my sincerity. In that case, I can only accompany you." The man in white said, "This time, you stay here and preside over the overall situation with Green Emissary. I will ask someone else to accompany me." Matsumoto Takeyoshi smiled at the man in white. "You want me to stay on this warship?" The man in white asked Matsumoto Takeyoshi doubtfully. "You now have the power of 100 demons in your body. When you arrive at the Sweet Dew Temple, your cultivation will be affected by the Golden Alms Bowl. You will not be able to protect me, but will be disturbed," Matsumoto Takeyoshi said as he sat back on the futon. "This place is very important, and it is also the hub. I cannot be without my own people. You and Green Emissary are my most trusted people. But in this way, who will be responsible for your safety?" The man in white frowned and asked Matsumoto Takeyoshi. For many years, he had been Matsumoto Takeyoshi's personal bodyguard, following him day and night. Now that Matsumoto Takeyoshi wanted to leave his protection, this made him a little worried about Matsumoto Takeyoshi's safety. "This time I will bring 2 people with me." Matsumoto Takeyoshi picked up the teacup and slowly said, "Miyamoto Akichi Sasaki." Hearing these 2 names, the man in white nodded slightly. These 2 people were the first group of masters that Matsumoto Takeyoshi had recruited. Their cultivation was very high, and they were loyal. They did things cleanly and never sloppily. The things they did later proved their strength. Sasaki's sword skills are outstanding, and he was born with great strength. Miyamoto Akichi's cultivation is exquisite, and his archery is unparalleled. Matsumoto Takeyoshi said calmly as he played with the teacup in his hand. "Among all the masters, only their abilities will not be affected by the Golden Alms Bowl. They are the most suitable to accompany me to Tibet." In the brightly lit Crown Prince Palace, the Crown Prince in a golden robe was holding a red brush and reading a mountain of memorials. Since the last time he had killed most of the corrupt officials, he had ordered the selection of talents from all over the country and promoted officials with both ability and integrity to support the country. During the time when most of the positions in the court were vacant, all the memorials were read by him alone. He often stayed up most of the night. "Your Highness, something has happened." An old eunuch holding a horsetail whisk hurriedly walked in from outside the palace door and came to the Crown Prince's desk. "What happened to make you so anxious?" The Crown Prince looked up at the old eunuch and asked with a smile as he continued to read the memorials. "Something has happened to Yi Fan," the old eunuch said. These words made the Crown Prince, who was bent over the desk and writing, frown instantly and stop writing. "Something has happened to Yi Fan? What happened?" The Crown Prince put the red brush on the brush holder and asked anxiously. "He went to Tibet to search for the cauldron according to your Highness's instructions, but he was unexpectedly restrained by the monks there." As the old eunuch spoke, he told the Crown Prince about how Yi Fan was trapped by the golden Buddha treasure bowl, and how Gasang Dorje would hold a demon-slaying conference in 10 days and kill Yi Fan, who was the reincarnation of Eldritch. "Pah!" After the Crown Prince heard this, he slammed the table and stood up. "How dare you evil monks touch my people?" The Crown Prince shouted angrily. "What do they want to do? Do they want to rebel?" "They are not targeting your Highness, but Eldritch," the old eunuch said in a low voice. "I don't care about the Eldritch of the first lunar month," the Crown Prince shouted. "He is a member of the Yi family in this life. He is my person. Whoever dares to touch him is going against me." The old eunuch lowered his head and did not speak. "Pass down my verbal order. Have that evil monk release him immediately. Otherwise, he will be executed without mercy." The crown prince said to the old eunuch, "Your Highness, please calm down. In my opinion, this matter is not that simple," the old eunuch said respectfully to the crown prince. "Almost all the people in Tibet believe in Buddhism, and the one who acted was Dharmaraja's junior brother. Moreover, this time, they're using the name of the demon-slaying conference. The imperial court cannot interfere at all. After all, Yifan has already become a demon. What they're doing is completely reasonable and in line with the will of the people. If your Highness really interferes, it will be difficult to convince the people. Secondly, it will expose the relationship between Yifan and your Highness. Thirdly, it may cause a mass uprising." After the crown prince heard this, he frowned and did not speak. The old eunuch's words were reasonable, and he could not refute them. Currently, the four countries were gathering their forces and eyeing the great Ming dynasty covetously. War could break out at any moment. If something happened in Tibet, it would be one disaster after another. "According to what you said, we can only watch as he is killed by that evil monk?" the crown prince asked the old eunuch. "This matter needs to be considered at length," the old eunuch replied. "Considered at length?" the crown prince asked. The crown prince retorted, "In another 10 days, Yifan will be killed by that evil monk. Tell me, how do you think we should make a long-term plan?" The old eunuch lowered his head and did not speak. "Go and prepare. Within 10 days, I want to be at Sweet Dew Temple," the crown prince ordered the old eunuch. "Bring many experts and disguise them. Prepare to snatch him." "But your Highness," the old eunuch was about to persuade the crown prince. "Do as I say," the crown prince interrupted the old eunuch. His voice was dignified without being angry. "Yes," the old eunuch replied with his head lowered. He did not think that the crown prince would put himself in danger for someone he had only met once. Chapter 600. 3 days later, Feishu Peak, Sweet Dew Temple. 10 o'clock at noon. Inside the Buddhist hall, the red-clothed Lama Gesang Doji sat cross-legged on a futon, silently reciting Buddhist scriptures. Although he kept reciting Buddhist scriptures, his mind was not on Buddhist scriptures at all. At this time, his heart was turbulent, and he was no longer as calm as before. When he thought that in 7 days, Eldritch would be executed on the spot and get his revenge, he could not help but feel inexplicably excited. He had already reincarnated in Tibet for 3 lives, not for anything else, but to find Eldritch's reincarnation and avenge the loss of his arm more than 300 years ago. More than 300 years ago, he was a Tibetan hunter with excellent archery skills. He hunted all day long for a living. Every day, he had meat to eat and wine to drink. When he was full, the whole family was not hungry. Although his life was not rich, it was still carefree. That day it was snowing heavily. He carried a strong bow and arrow, dry food and strong wine, and entered the great snow mountain alone. Snowflakes fluttered down like goose feathers, and very quickly the snow was knee-deep. If it were other hunters, they would have retreated long ago. Braving such heavy snow to enter the mountains was no joke. It was very likely that they would get lost in the depths of the mountains. If they were to encounter a pack of wolves that were out looking for food, they would definitely not be able to return. If they were alive, they would not be able to find them. If they were dead, they would not be able to find their bodies. But that was someone else. For him, who had excellent shooting skills, he could not wait to encounter a pack of wolves. Ever since he started his hunting career, the prey that had died in his hands numbered in the hundreds. Tibetan antelope, wild deer, wild yak, wild donkey, wild wolf, and even snow leopard. Among them, the wild animals that died in his hands the most were wolves. He had his own unique skill to deal with wolves. Every time he would set a trap to catch a wild deer, then he would catch it alive, tie it to a big tree with a rope, and cut its thigh with a dagger. After doing all this, he found a towering tree in the opposite direction of the wild deer, climbed up nimbly, hid in the branches, and tied himself to the trunk with a rope, drinking and eating meat while waiting for the appearance of a large prey. The cries of the wild deer and the smell of blood in the air would quickly attract ferocious beasts. Among these ferocious beasts, there was a high chance that there would be packs of wild wolves. When the bloodthirsty wolves tore at the wild deer, he, who was hiding in the bushes, quietly knocked his bow and shot sharp arrows at the wolves who were feasting on the deer. His archery skills allowed him to shoot 3 arrows at a time, and all of them hit their targets. When the wolves discovered him on the tree, they would crazily surround him, howling as they climbed up the tree. However, wolves didn't know how to climb trees. If they couldn't climb trees, they would open their bloody mouths and gnaw on the tree trunk. During this period of time, his arrows would rain down on the ground below. A pack of dozens of wolves would often die under his arrows in less than a moment. Even if there were fish that escaped the net, he would never let them go. He could shoot a copper coin that was tied to a string and swinging continuously from a distance of 300 feet, not to mention a huge wolf. In just one hunt, he had obtained dozens of high-quality wolf skins and over 1,000 pounds of wolf meat. This time was no exception. After tying a young deer to a tree trunk, he took out a dagger and fiercely cut the young deer's thigh. The young deer was in great pain and whined. He put away his dagger and climbed up the tree, hiding his body in the crown of the tree. He quickly tied himself to a thick branch with a rope, then drank and ate meat while observing the movements below. This time, his luck came again. A large pack of wolves that went out to hunt for food quickly smelled the tempting smell of blood in the air and heard the cries of the young deer. The snow had sealed off the mountain, and almost all animals would return to their nests. This caused the large hunting animals to suddenly lose their source of food. Seeing the appearance of their prey, dozens of wolves, under the leadership of the Wolf King, crazily pounced on the young deer that was screaming incessantly. When he saw this from the bushes, the corners of his mouth curled up. He took out a sharp steel sword from his quiver and aimed it at the pack of wolves. The young deer's screams were quickly drowned out by the sound of the wolves eating. Blood splattered everywhere, and bones cracked. The young deer that was abnormally agile was instantly left with a bloody deer skin. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh in the bushes he released the bowstring, and 3 sharp arrows shot straight at the Wolf King leading the pack. A Wolf King's fur was comparable to dozens of good wolf fur, so it was naturally targeted by all. Pooh, pooh, pooh with 3 muffled sounds. The 3 sharp arrows all hit the Wolf King's body. The Wolf King's body trembled and slowly fell into a pool of blood. It was a success. Hiding in the crown of the tree, the corners of his mouth curled up, and he was overjoyed. As long as the Wolf King died, the rest of the wolves would definitely surround him and take revenge for the Wolf King. At that time, even if he closed his eyes, he would be able to kill all the wolves under the tree. As expected, when the wolves saw the Wolf King die, they immediately howled and surrounded the tree he was in, jumping and pouncing on the tree. Stupid beasts, I'll send you to heaven right now, he thought in his heart, and the arrows in his hands rained down like rain. As the howls rose and fell, the wolves fell into a pool of blood one by one. In less than an hour, dozens of wolves had died under his rain of arrows. He untied the rope on his body, held the bow in his mouth, and quickly climbed down from the towering tree. He slowly walked in front of the mountain of wolf corpses with a proud expression. This time, he was going to earn a lot of money again. He whistled and reached out to drag the wolf corpses away one by one, to prevent the wolf blood from flowing out and freezing the corpses in one place, making it difficult to take away. However, just as he was dragging one of the giant wolves, a fluffy wolf cub poked its head out of the corpse and fiercely bit his wrist. Ouch! He cried out as he put down the wolf corpse in his hand and covered his wrist. Dark red blood flowed out from his wrist. Zing! After biting his wrist, the wolf cub, whose teeth had not grown out yet, twisted its body and quickly ran into the dense forest in the distance. Damn it, you want to run after biting me? Seeing the wolf cub running away, he endured the piercing pain and reached out to pick up the bow. He pulled out a sharp arrow and knocked it on the bowstring. He aimed at the wolf cub that was running for its life and suddenly released the bowstring in his hand. Whoosh! The sharp arrow flew towards the wolf cub at high speed. Puff! Blood splattered, and the sharp arrow instantly pierced through the thigh of the wolf cub that was running away. "Awoo!" The wolf cub cried out in pain and fell onto the snow. The surrounding white snow was instantly dyed red with blood. The injury on his wrist made his excellent archery lose its accuracy. Otherwise, the wolf cub's thigh would not have been pierced through by the sharp sword. "Today, I'll skin you alive." Seeing that the wolf cub was not dead, he said fiercely as he pulled out a sharp hidden knife from his waist. He stepped on the thick snow and quickly walked toward the wolf cub. The wolf cub whimpered as it climbed up from the snow. It dragged its thigh that was pierced by the arrow and struggled to continue forward. On the snow, there was a long scarlet blood trail. How could a wolf cub with a seriously injured leg outrun a hunter who was as fast as flying? Soon, with the sharp hidden knife in his hand, he caught up with the wolf cub and was less than 10 feet away. "Let's see where you're going to run today," he said as he revealed a fierce expression. At this time, the wolf cub was already exhausted. It had lost too much blood and did not have the strength to crawl forward. It stopped and struggled to turn around. It looked at the hunter who was gradually approaching it with a strong sense of righteousness. There was no fear in its eyes. On its forehead, a tuft of white hair was very eye-catching. That's right, it was the descendant of the Wolf King. This time, the Wolf King specially brought it with him to train its hunting ability. Who would have thought that what awaited them would be a disaster? When the arrow was shot at the Wolf King could have used his keen observation to avoid the arrow. But in that case, the arrow would have shot at the cub beside him. In order to protect the cub, the Wolf King chose to protect it with his body. But unfortunately, the wolf cub still could not escape the hunter's arrow. Woo! The wolf cub bared its teeth and demonstrated to the hunter. As the descendant of the Wolf King, naturally a newborn calf was not afraid of tiger. Although it was seriously injured, it did not lose the dignity of its family. Stinking wolf cub, die! Seeing that the wolf cub was not panicking in the face of danger, he suddenly burned with anger and slashed the wolf cub's neck with the shining hidden knife in his hand. The wolf cub closed its eyes and waited for its death. At this time, it no longer had the strength to fight back. Whoosh! The hidden knife quickly slashed, making an ear-piercing sound. However, the scene of blood splattering in front of him was not what he imagined. Instead, a person appeared. This person was wearing a blue robe with a carefree scarf on his head. His face was like jade, his hair was as black as ink, and his eyes were like cold stars. His face was delicate and elegant, but there was a hint of evil in his eyes. The wolf cub, covered in blood, was in this person's arms. "You? Who are you?" He was surprised to see a person suddenly appear in front of him. Anyone would be surprised to see a living person appear out of thin air on this snowy mountain. This person was none other than Eldritch. He had just finished discussing Buddhism with the little monk of Golden Rock Fawang's previous 3 lives. On his way back to Phoenix Crime Mountain's Lingyun Cave, he saw this tragic scene below. A hunter hunting and a pack of wolves hunting was the will of the heavens and was not strange. However, the hunter's greed and murderous intent, as well as the wolf cub's awe-inspiring righteousness and fearlessness towards death, made his heart tremble. He pressed down on the cloud and descended from the sky. The moment the hunter swung his knife, he moved and hugged the wolf cub, who had closed its eyes and was waiting for death, in his arms. "The heavens are benevolent. Don't kill them all," Eldritch said as he expressionlessly looked up at the hunter. He then looked down at the wolf cub in his arms that had lost too much blood and was on the verge of death. He reached out and touched the wolf cub's neck. The wolf cub was still alive. "Don't talk nonsense. He is my prey. Return him to me, or else I won't be polite to you," the hunter fiercely said to Eldritch. The person in front of him looked gentle and cultured. He must be a Han Chinese scholar who came to this snowy mountain to recite poems and enjoy the scenery. This kind of weak person who could be blown away by the wind was not his opponent. You say he is your prey. What proof do you have? Eldritch asked without raising his head. He reached out and grabbed the arrow in the wolf cub's leg. A gentle white light emitted from his hand, and the arrow was slowly pulled out from the wolf cub's leg. What was surprising was that after the arrow was pulled out, the wound on the wolf cub's leg instantly disappeared. Eldritch placed the arrow in front of his eyes and turned it to examine it. The arrow was made of fine steel and was incomparably sharp. There was also a barb at the front. This kind of arrow was very vicious and could not be pulled out. It could only be taken out from the other end of the body. Otherwise, the bones and tendons would be broken and at least a few ounces of flesh would be taken out. Chapter 601. Evidence? Humph. The hunter sneered, "The arrow in your hand is mine, so, of course, the one I shot is my prey." "The one you shot is your prey?" Eldritch asked coldly. "Of course," the hunter said arrogantly. "If that's the case, then wouldn't the one I caught be my prey?" Eldritch asked back with an evil smile on his face. Every time he killed someone, he would show this kind of smile. "That's right," the hunter smiled. "As long as you can kill all living things in this snow mountain, they're all your prey. However, it depends on whether you have the ability." The hunter said, and looked at Eldritch with disdain. The man in front of him looked gentle, but he didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. If he could catch prey, even pigs would climb trees. "You should run," Eldritch said with a smile. "Run? What do you mean, run?" The hunter was confused by the words of the young man in front of him and asked, "From now on, you are my prey, and I am the hunter who hunts you." Eldritch laughed. "Don't let me catch you." The hunter was stunned at first, but then he laughed loudly. "Ha ha!" The hunter laughed until tears almost came out of his eyes. "You really don't know what's good for you, kid. How dare you talk to me like that? I advise you to quickly hand over this wolf cub to me, or else I'll kill you too." Eldritch didn't even look at the hunter. He lowered his head and stroked the wolf cub in his arms. "There's a path to heaven, but you don't want to take it. There's no door to hell, but you want to barge in. Today, I'll let you die on this snow mountain and feed the wolves." Seeing that the other party was not afraid, the furious hunter waved the shining hidden knife in his hand and fiercely chopped at Eldritch. Being bitten by a wolf cub already made him angry. And now this wild kid who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth came out of nowhere to steal his prey. How could he not want to kill? Seeing that the other party was about to attack, Eldritch lowered his head and stroked the wolf cub. His mouth curved into an evil smile. "Death is near, and you still have a mood to laugh. Let's see if you can still laugh later." The hunter thought and increased the strength of his hand. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, the hidden blade slashed horizontally. A vicious smile appeared on the hunter's face. With this slash, this young man's head would probably be separated from his body. This is the consequence of meddling in other people's business. However, the next scene froze the smile on his face. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of metal clashing rang out, and the sharp hidden blade that was less than half a foot away from Eldritch was instantly broken into pieces. Now, only the hilt of the hidden saber was left in his hand. Eldritch, who was stroking the wolf pup with his head lowered, raised his head slightly and looked at the stunned hunter with a strange smile. Are you a human or a ghost?" The hunter was obviously frightened by this scene. He threw away the hilt in his hand and stammered as he staggered backwards. This was the first time in his life that he felt such fear. "Now it's my turn to hunt." Eldritch smiled as he placed the arrow in front of his eyes. He leisurely looked at the barb on the arrowhead that was covered in wolf blood and shone with a cold light. Hearing this, the hunter's face immediately changed. He quickly turned around, waded through the knee-deep snow, and quickly fled into the distance. It didn't matter if the opponent was a human or a ghost. In short, he could not afford to offend this person. The most important thing now was to save his life. Although his wrist was injured, it did not affect his speed at all. In the blink of an eye, he had already run more than 10 feet away. Looking at Eldritch again, he slowly whistled while calmly pinching the body of the arrow in his hand. He placed it in front of his eyes and pointed the tip of the arrow at the hunter who was running away. He constantly adjusted the direction of the arrow. Come, 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 turn around. Eldritch squinted his eyes and aimed the arrow at the hunter as he smiled and talked to himself. Most of the prey had a habit of running away. When they felt that they had escaped danger, they would involuntarily turn around to see if the other party had caught up. This hunter was no exception. When he was about 300 meters away, he stopped panting and turned around to look back while gasping for breath. In his opinion, more than 100 feet was a very safe distance. But he was wrong. The moment he turned around, Eldritch's mouth curved and he lightly threw the arrow in his hand. Swoosh! The arrow turned into a white light and flew 7 feet from the ground towards the hunter who was more than 100 feet away. Its speed was as fast as lightning. Eldritch never killed people behind their backs. Everyone who died in his hands was facing him. Puff! The hunter who turned around only saw a glaring white light and then felt a sharp pain in his thigh. It was so painful that it penetrated his bones. When he came back to his senses, the arrow in Eldritch's hand had already pierced through his right thigh. Under the intense pain, the hunter let out a miserable howl, his voice echoing in the valley. He used his hand to cover his bleeding thigh and sat down on the snow. He grimaced in pain. Eldritch, who was holding the wolf pup, smiled. The tip of his foot lightly touched the snow and flew 3 feet above the ground towards the hunter. The hunter never thought that this cultured young man would have such skills. He even knew how to ride the wind. Today, he had met an expert. Thinking of this, the pale-faced hunter did not have time to deal with the arrow in his thigh. He struggled to get up from the snow and dragged his bleeding leg forward step by step. On the snow 10 feet away from him, Eldritch, who was wearing a white robe, slowly landed. He held the wolf pup in his arms and had an evil smile on his face. He approached the hunter step by step, the snow under his feet making crunching sounds. The hunter clenched his teeth and continued to drag himself forward. Behind him, there was a long trail of blood. It was a shocking sight. At this moment, he was in the same situation as the wolf pup. His thigh was hit by an arrow, and he was bleeding profusely. Eldritch calmly followed behind him, like an experienced old cat playing with a mouse that had nowhere to run. Finally, the hunter had no more strength. He gasped for breath and laid flat on the snow. The white smoke he exhaled condensed on his beard with a layer of frost. "How is it? Does it feel good now?" Eldritch slowly walked in front of the hunter and said while smiling at the pale-faced hunter, "Immortal, immortal, spare my life." The hunter gasped for breath and begged Eldritch for mercy. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. In this situation, survival was more important. "Didn't you just say that you want to kill me?" As Eldritch spoke, he slowly bent down and reached out to grab the arrow in the hunter's thigh and pulled it out abruptly. Poof! As the sharp arrow with a barbed hook was pulled out by Eldritch, a stream of blood gushed out. On the hook of the arrow, there were a few strands of bloody flesh and veins. The hunter let out a miserable howl and rolled on the ground while holding his thigh. His leg could be considered to be crippled. Eldritch sneered and threw away the arrow in his hand. He slowly stood up and coldly looked at the hunter who was rolling on the snow and howling nonstop. Great immortal, I was wrong. Please have mercy. Spare me." The hunter wailed. "You are sinister and despicable. You are greedy, shameless, and vicious. Leaving people like you in this world will only lead to misery and suffering." Eldritch said calmly. His eyes narrowed and his right palm glowed with white light. "Mr. Yi, please stop, please stop." Just as Eldritch was about to take the hunter's life, a young llama waved his hand and ran over from afar. This person was none other than Golden Rock Fawang in his previous life. In this life, his Buddhist name was Danju, and he was a monk in a nearby temple. He and Evil Moon met by chance at a Dharma assembly. They had a good conversation and hit it off at first sight. They became close friends and often practiced Zen and discussed Taoism and Buddhism together. This time, when he was watching Eldritch's auspicious clouds fly into the sky, he he suddenly saw the auspicious clouds suddenly turn around and fall into the snowy mountains. Seeing this, he didn't have time to think and immediately went down the mountain to check. He was very familiar with Eldritch's hatred of evil. This time, the auspicious clouds suddenly fell because he saw something unjust and wanted to help. Helping was not a bad thing, but Eldritch often took people's lives when he did. He had tried to persuade him many times, but Eldritch always laughed and didn't take it seriously. Now that this happened near the temple, and he was a Buddhist, he couldn't just stand by and watch. When he braved the wind and snow to come here, Eldritch was about to kill him. When Eldritch heard Danju's cry, he frowned and dispersed the spiritual power in his hand. "Why aren't you meditating in the temple? What are you doing here?" Eldritch looked at the panting Danju in front of him and asked with a frown, Are you going to kill again?" Danju bent down and held his leg, gasping for breath as he asked Eldritch. In this life, although he was proficient in Buddhism, he didn't have any supernatural powers. Running all the way made him short of breath and stutter. "I'm enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. Don't be a busybody and go back quickly," Eldritch said and turned his gaze to the hunter who was groaning in pain. "No," Danju said and stood in front of the hunter. "You can't kill again." The hunter saw that a monk was pleading for him and immediately hugged Danju's leg. Master, save me," the hunter begged. "The heavens are virtuous. He has already been punished. Please spare his life." Danju looked at the hunter who was covered in blood and said to Eldritch. There was no need to guess that the hunter's injuries were caused by Eldritch. He deserved to die. Don't plead for him. Eldritch said to Danju, Master. The hunter hugged Danju's leg tightly and said crazily, "I'm willing to repent and become a monk with Master. Please save me. He had already experienced Eldritch's methods. This person could kill him as easily as crushing an ant. The red-clothed llama in front of him was his only savior. When Eldritch heard this, he frowned. "You're willing to lay down your butcher's knife and become a monk with me?" Danju asked the hunter. I'm willing. The hunter endured the pain and knelt in front of Danju. "Master, please accept a bow from your disciple." As the hunter spoke, he kowtowed like he was pounding garlic. "Okay, I'll accept you," Danju said and looked up at Eldritch. "He's my disciple now. You can't kill him." Saving a life was better than building a 7-floor pagoda. He couldn't leave him to die. "For your sake, I'll make an exception and spare his life." Eldritch looked down at the trembling hunter kneeling on the ground and said, "But while he can avoid death, he can't escape punishment. Today, I'll take one of his arms so that he can't hold a bow. I'll leave him with the other arm to worship Buddha." As Eldritch said this, he stretched out one hand and bent his fingers into a claw. He sucked at the hunter kneeling on the snow. Puff! After a muffled sound, the hunter's left arm was torn from his body and flew into Eldritch's hand. Blood flowed like rain. The hunter didn't even make a sound as he fell into a pool of blood. "I've finished my job. You can take care of the rest," Eldritch said to Danju as he threw the bloody arm in his hand onto the snow. With a flick of his sleeve, he disappeared into thin air. Chapter 602. Crack. When he recalled the scene of his left arm being torn off from his shoulder by Evil Moon back then, Gasandoj, who was sitting cross-legged and chanting sutras, could not help but burn with rage. He forcefully crushed one of the Vajra Bodhi prayer beads in his hand. Knock, knock, knock. The sound of knocking on the door made him withdraw his thoughts. "Master, there are 8 people at the foot of the mountain. They want to see you." A young lama's voice came from outside the door. Gusandoji slowly opened his eyes and stopped chanting. 8 people? Who are they?" Gusandoji turned his head and asked the young lama outside the door. "They only said that they are Eldritch's enemies. They didn't say anything else," the young lama replied. "Eldritch's enemies?" Gusandoji's eyes lit up when he heard that. He did not expect that Eldritch's enemies would come to him just 3 days after the news was released. Moreover, there were 8 of them. Arrange for them to wait in the tea room. I'll be there in a while, Gusandoji said to the young lama. Yes, master, the young lama responded and turned to leave. Gusandoji patiently finished chanting the rest of the scriptures. Then, he closed the prayer book and stood up from the futon. He put on the abbot's robe, opened the door, and walked out of the hall. He slowly walked to the tea room in the backyard. In the tea room, 8 middle-aged men dressed as Taoists sat quietly on 8 wooden chairs. These 8 people wore purple gold Taoist hats, golden silk robes, apricot cloud shoes, swords on their backs, and horsetail whisks in their hands. Their faces were calm and solemn. May I know the reason why you have come to my Ganlu temple? Gusandoji asked as he slowly walked in. When they saw the abbot's robe, the 8 people immediately guessed Gusandoji's identity and stood up from their seats. Immeasurable Heavenly Lord. One of the slightly older Taoists waved his horsetail whisk and addressed him as Immeasurable. He then bowed to Gesang Duoji Xing. Kunlun sect's 8 Yin Yang disciples greets Master Gesang. When the other 7 people saw their leader greet them, they followed suit and bowed to Gusandoji. Yin Yang 8 disciples. When Gusandoji heard the other party's name, he was immediately shocked. Haven't you been 400 years ago? The Yin Yang 8 disciples were renowned throughout the Jianghu. Everyone in the world knew about them. These 8 people lived in seclusion in Kunlun and were known as the Yin Yang 8 science. They cultivated the Yin Yang 8 extreme Tao, respectively. Their Tao techniques were exquisite and their cultivation was extremely high. The Yin Yang 8 extreme formation that they created was even more exquisite and unbreakable. However, it was precisely these 8 top-notch masters of Taoism who were killed by Eldritch, who was neither good nor evil, that caused an uproar in the cultivation world at that time. At that time, Eldritch's reputation was like the sun in the sky. Even the children in the private school would casually sing the words, both good and evil. The moon is white and the wind is clean. It was obvious how great Eldritch's reputation was. But even so, there were only a few people who had really seen Eldritch's true face. Eldritch usually didn't make a move, but once he did, he would take someone's life. Often, before the person who was saved had time to see the person's face clearly, Eldritch had already disappeared. According to the rumors, this person abhorred evil and was unruly. He liked to admire the moon alone and often rode on auspicious clouds on nights when the moonlight was like water and the breeze was blowing gently, wandering the heavens. If a large group of auspicious clouds was seen floating around the full moon on a full moon night, it would undoubtedly be Eldritch. Eldritch's reputation made the Yin Yang 8 disciples, who were also famous in the cultivation world, feel disgusted. As the saying went, in life, fame and fortune were 2 things. Although these 8 people's Tao techniques were exquisite and their cultivation was exquisite, they had only seen through the desire for money and material things. They valued their reputation very much, even more than their own lives. As the saying went, 2 tigers cannot live on one mountain. When they knew that Eldritch would definitely take someone's life when he made a move, the Yin Yang 8 disciples issued a letter of challenge to Eldritch in the name of cleaning up the scum of Taoism. They released the news that they would meet Eldritch at the Phoenix Perch restaurant on the 15th day of the 8th lunar month and fight it out. In order to force Eldritch to show up, they booked the entire Phoenix Perch restaurant and hung a long couplet on the roof of the restaurant. The couplet said, "Eldritch's scum, ashamed of his inferiority." On the 15th day of the 8th lunar month, the Yin Yang 8 disciples arrived at the main hall of the top floor early in the morning. They held their swords and waited for Eldritch to show up. All the major cultivation sects and elites of Taoism heard the news and gathered at the Phoenix Perch restaurant. They wanted to see Eldritch's elegant demeanor and watch this fierce battle between dragons and tigers. However, they waited for an entire night in the Phoenix Perch restaurant and Eldritch still didn't show up. The Yin Yang 8 disciples looked at each other and smiled. They thought the other party had admitted defeat. However, just as they walked out of the Phoenix Perch restaurant with a smile on their faces, they suddenly realized that the couplet hanging on the roof had disappeared and was replaced by a four-word poem. It said, "Yin Yang 8 disciples, shameless. I admire the moon today and have no intention of moving my fingers." Eldritch, the calligraphy of this four-word quatrain was vigorous and powerful. The brush strokes were like dragons and snakes. It looked natural and unrestrained. Seeing this handwriting, all the experts were dumbfounded and looked at each other in dismay. They were all top-notch cultivation experts, yet none of them realized that Eldritch had been here. What level had this person's cultivation reached? The 16 words of this poem made the Yin Yang 8 disciples' faces turn green and white. They gnashed their teeth and burned with anger. Yin Yang 8 disciples, shameless. I admire the moon today and have no intention of moving my fingers. The meaning of this poem couldn't be more obvious. It meant that the Yin Yang 8 disciples were nothing and that they were all shameless people. He wanted to admire the moon today and had no intention of moving his fingers. The meaning of this poem was that the 8 of them together weren't even enough to move his fingers. One arrogant tone, the 8 people wanted to kill Eldritch. In order to repay this humiliation, they spread the news again and asked Eldritch to meet at the Phoenix Perch restaurant on the night of the 9th of September. In order to ensure that Eldritch could show up in front of them this time, they found a pair of beggars on the street. Then, they tied them up and tied them to the pillar in front of the 8 people. Didn't you, Eldritch, like to help poor and pitiful people? Didn't you hate evil and punish the strong and help the weak? Today, we caught this pair of beggars. Let's see how you're going to save them. For the sake of reputation, the Yin Yang 8 disciples would do anything. They didn't know that what they did this time would cost the 8 of them their lives. The old beggar and his 7- or 8-year-old granddaughter were tied to the pillar. Their faces were filled with fear and tears as they begged to be let go. The 8 people turned a deaf ear to their pleas. They even hoped that they would cry as pitifully as possible. The more they cried, the more likely it was that Eldritch would appear. The onlookers downstairs were somewhat dissatisfied with the Yin Yang 8 disciples' actions. However, they didn't really want to make things difficult for the pair of beggars. They just wanted to lure Eldritch out, so they didn't say anything. Speaking of which, the Yin Yang 8 disciples were currently in a fit of anger. If anyone tried to stop them, they might become their punching bag. The pair of beggars cried and wept. It was a miserable scene. The 8 people quietly drank tea and waited for Eldritch to appear. Whoosh! Just as the Mingyu was hanging high in the sky and the stars were shining, a gust of cold wind blew in from the window. The 8 people simultaneously turned their heads to the window. There was no one at the window, so it was a false alarm, the 8 people thought to themselves. However, when they turned their heads, they realized that the pair of beggars who were tied to the pillar had disappeared. Only ropes were left on the ground. That gust of wind, just now, was Eldritch. The 8 people's expressions changed, and they quickly got up from their seats. Eldritch, you're as timid as a mouse. You don't dare to show yourself. Tian Xian, who was ranked first among the Yin Yang 8 disciples, said angrily to the empty air, "If you have the ability, come out and fight us." Under the circumstances where the 8 people were waiting, the 2 living people, one old and one young, were quietly rescued by the other party. This was a great humiliation to the Yin Yang 8 disciples. Eldritch, if you're scared, just say the word. We can spare your life. Di Kuan, who was ranked second among the Yin Yang 8 disciples, also shouted to the air. Disasters committed by the heavens can be avoided, but disasters committed by oneself cannot be avoided. Following a clear voice, Eldritch, who was dressed in a white robe, appeared in front of the 8 people. He was less than 3 feet away from them. "You're Eldritch." Tian Xian pointed at Eldritch with one hand and asked sternly. "I'm the one and only," Eldritch said with a smile as he stroked his long hair. "We thought you wouldn't dare to show yourself," Di Kuan said with a cold smile. "I have to settle the 2 of them down first. Otherwise, it won't be good if we see blood and scare the children." Eldritch looked straight at Di Kuan with a smile. Eldritch's smile sent a chill down Di Kuan's spine. This chill spread from his tailbone all the way to his neck. Our debt is settled today. Tian Qian said, either you die today, or I live. Either I die, or you live. Eldritch said with a smile, you don't sound like you have much of a choice. You. Tian Qian was rendered speechless by Eldritch. The 8 yin-yang disciples and I have always walked our own paths. We've always minded our own business, Eldritch said with a smile. Now, you're going against each other for a mere reputation. Don't you think you're making a mountain out of a molehill? Eldritch. Dikuan pointed at Eldritch and shouted sternly, you've been tormenting living creatures in the name of enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. Today, the 8 yin-yang disciples will get rid of you, you evil creature. If you kneel and beg for mercy, we'll leave your corpse intact. Otherwise, we'll tear you to pieces, and not even your bones will be left. When he saw that Eldritch had exposed their intentions, he immediately pretended to be enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. A man is harmless to the heart of tiger, but a tiger harms the heart of a man. It seems that I have no choice but to kill today. Eldritch's voice began to turn cold. Clang, clang, clang. As soon as Eldritch said this, the 8 yin-yang disciples immediately drew their sword from their backs. The 8 swords shone like frost and snow. They flickered with a cold light, and their sword auras were threatening. These 8 people had extremely high cultivations, so their swords were naturally extraordinary as well. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. After the 8 yin-yang disciples drew their swords, they immediately moved and surrounded Eldritch. They knew that Eldritch's cultivation was extremely high, so they immediately used their signature technique, the 8 yin-yang extreme formation. Eldritch, you're about to die. What else do you have to say? Tian Qian pointed his sword at Eldritch and asked sternly. Chapter 603. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Hearing Evil Moon's arrogant words, the 8 yin-yang disciples were instantly enraged. They shook the swords in their hands and immediately activated their body movements. They swayed their bodies and performed their signature unique skill, yin-yang 8 poles formation. The yin-yang 8 extremes formation was based on the Tai Chi yin and yang, and the 8 trigrams were the core. It was mysterious and unpredictable, coupled with the fact that the 8 of them had been cultivating for many years and were mentally connected. The power of the formation was even more shocking. The 8 yin-yang disciples used the 8 trigrams footwork and circled Eldritch at high speed while activating the divine weapons in their hands. But under the activation of the 8 people's spiritual energy, the 8 divine weapons shone brightly and made clanging sounds. Swoosh! As the 8 yin-yang disciples circled faster and faster, the light emitted from the 8 divine weapons formed a huge circular white light shield. The light shield was 30 feet wide and 10 feet tall. The white light was dazzling, and the sword chi was majestic. It completely covered Eldritch. In the center of the light shield, Eldritch, dressed in a white robe, looked at the dazzling light shield with interest and a smile on his face. Yin-yang 8 extremes. Break the demon and capture the enemy. Tian Qian, who was ranked first among the 8 yin-yang disciples, gave the order to attack. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. After the 8 yin-yang disciples heard the order, they immediately stopped. At the same time, they activated the divine weapons in their hands and pointed their swords at Eldritch. Swoosh! 8 white beams of pure sword chi shot out from the 8 divine weapons and went straight for Eldritch in the center. At this time, the 8 directions of Evil Moon had been completely sealed. There was no way to escape from the sky or into the ground. The huge white light shield shrunk as the 8 people attacked. Eldritch, who was surrounded in the center, was still smiling and standing with his hands behind his back as if nothing had happened. He even closed his eyes slowly. When arrogant Eldritch, facing such a killer move, he did not dodge at all. Today, I want to see how you're going to take this move from the 8 of us. Dikuan, who was ranked second among the 8 yin-yang disciples, thought to himself as he activated his sword chi. The 8 sword moves were extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, they were in front of Eldritch. Eldritch still did not move. Swish, swish, swish. 8 resplendent beams of sword energy shot straight into Eldritch's body. Seeing this, the 8 yin-yang scions smiled smugly. What righteous and evil! What heaven-defying cultivation! What rebellious! A mere Eldritch? That's all there is to it, the 8 yin-yang masters thought to themselves. However, what happened next made them unable to laugh anymore. Evil Moon was not pierced with 16 bloody holes by the 8 sword chis, as they had imagined. Instead, he was still standing there, quietly and motionless. Buzz, buzz, buzz. 8 rays of resplendent white light continuously swam around his body, shuttling back and forth, making sizzling sounds. It was sword chi. It was the sword chi that the 8 of them had just released. When the 8 yin-yang masters saw this, their pupils constricted. Not only did the boundless sword energy that the 8 of them were so proud of fail to pierce through Eldritch's body, it was instead absorbed by him, as if he was having fun. While the 8 of them were dumbfounded, Eldritch opened his mouth to speak. The yin-yang 8 extremes formation lives up to its name. With his eyes closed, Eldritch said with a smile as he felt the 8 rays of spiritual energy rush into his body. Buzz, the 8 rays of white light that were shuttling around Eldritch's body suddenly condensed at his chest, forming a fist-sized white light ball. The light ball was brilliant and filled with lightning. He actually condensed the 8 rays of sword energy into one. The 8 yin-yang disciples widened their eyes in disbelief at the sight before them. Although the 8 rays of sword energy looked the same, they were actually yin and yang, mutually reinforcing and restraining each other. Even though they had been cultivating for many years, each of them had only majored in one element. However, this Eldritch had so easily condensed the 8 mutually reinforcing and restraining spiritual energy into one. What kind of cultivation did he have to be able to do this? The expressions of the 8 of them changed drastically. This Eldritch was indeed as rumored. His cultivation was heaven-defying and unfathomable. They began to regret making Eldritch an enemy. Unfortunately, it was all too late. Just as they were stunned by the scene in front of them, Eldritch spoke again. These 8 rays of spiritual energy are yours. I'll return them all. Whoosh! As soon as Evil Moon's voice fell, 8 rays of dazzling white sword chi instantly shot out from the white light ball condensed on his chest and shot in all directions. Its brilliance was dazzling, its spiritual chi was dense, and its speed was several times faster than before. The dazzling white light illuminated the shocked faces of the 8 yin-yang masters. Puff, puff, puff. With a few muffled sounds, the chests of the 8 yin-yang disciples were instantly pierced by 8 majestic sword chis, creating a bloody hole the size of a bowl. Blood splattered everywhere. It was a glaring scarlet color. The 8 pale-faced men lowered their heads and stared blankly at the bloody holes in their chests, their eyes filled with disbelief. They had never thought that they would be killed by their own sword energy. Plop, plop. The pupils of the 8 of them instantly dilated, and they fell into a pool of blood dead. When everything returned to normal, Eldritch slowly opened his eyes. With a smile on his face, he stepped on the red blood on the ground and slowly walked over the corpses. He went directly to the seat on the side, picked up the teapot on the table, and poured himself a cup of fragrant tea. Whoosh! A gust of cold wind blew past. Clatter, clatter. After the cold wind passed, the sound of chains being dragged could be heard from downstairs. In a short while, 2 ghostly figures staggered up from downstairs. The 2 of them were wearing pointed hats and long robes, one black and one white. The one in the white robe was holding a white mourning staff in one hand and a black fengdu ghost token with red words on the other. He had a happy expression on his face, and his long tongue was sticking out. On his pointed hat were the words, "You're here too." The one in the black robe was holding a black morning staff in one hand and a black netherworld chain flying claw in the other. He had a serious expression, and the words, "Catching you," were written on his pointed hat. The two of them were none other than the underworld's divine lords, Black and White Impermanence. Eldritch smiled as he quietly drank his tea while glancing at the Black and White divine lords who were slowly walking up the stairs. 8 of them died at once. We brothers have work to do again. White Impermanence looked at the 8 corpses on the ground and said, "These 8 people seem to have been injured by the same person." Black Impermanence bent down and looked down at the bowl-sized bloody hole in the chest of the corpses and said, White Impermanence, who was sticking out his tongue, looked up at Eldritch. At this time, Eldritch moved the teacup away from his mouth and looked at White Impermanence. When White Impermanence saw Eldritch's cold eyes, he frowned and then looked away. "Let's capture the souls of these 8 people first. We'll talk about it when we return to the underworld." White Impermanence said to Black Impermanence. "Okay," Black Impermanence said as he stood up and swept the black morning staff in his hand at the 8 corpses. Buzz, as a black curtain of light spread out, 8 translucent souls slowly stood up from the corpses. "Two divine sovereigns, please uphold justice for us 8 brothers." Tian Qian, who was already a soul, immediately knelt on the ground when he saw the Black and White Impermanence. He said as he kowtowed to the Black and White Impermanence, "Divine lords, please give us justice." The remaining 7 people also knelt on the ground and kowtowed nonstop. "What grievances did you have and who killed you?" White Impermanence asked when he saw the souls kneeling on the ground. Replying to the 2 divine lords, "We are the Yin Yang 8 of the Kunlun Mountain. We originally wanted to do justice for the heavens and capture Eldritch. However, we didn't expect that Eldritch's evil techniques were so powerful that we were no match for him. Instead, we were killed by him." Di Kuan said. "Eldritch?" Black and White Impermanence were shocked when they heard this name. The 2 of them looked at each other and then at the 8 souls. "The one who killed you is Eldritch?" "Yes," Di Kuan answered. "As far as I know, although Eldritch is ruthless, he only kills evil people." White Impermanence asked the souls coldly, "Did you do something bad to end up like this?" After White Impermanence asked this question, everyone looked at each other, not knowing how to answer. White Impermanence sneered. It was obvious that the 8 of them must have done something wrong or offended Eldritch. That was why they were killed. "Where is Eldritch now?" Black Impermanence asked. "We also have something to look for him." Countless people had died in Eldritch's hands. Naturally, they were looking for him. "Right here." Di Kuan pointed behind him. "It's him." Black and White Impermanence looked across. However, to everyone's surprise, the seat was already empty. There was not a single person left in it. "Where is he?" "He was just drinking tea here." Di Kuan asked in surprise. "You mean the young man in the white robe was Eldritch?" White Impermanence asked with a frown. "That's him," Di Kuan answered. "No wonder." White Impermanence muttered to himself. The 2 of them had never seen Eldritch before. When they looked at each other just now, they felt that the other party's eyes were extremely cold, even colder than the 8 winters hell. So he was Eldritch. This person's cultivation was indeed worthy of his reputation. He disappeared without a trace in a flash. Even the 2 of them did not notice when he left. "Big brother, what should we do?" Black Impermanence saw White Impermanence frown and knew that this was unusual. "Take them back to the underworld first and report this to King Yama." White Impermanence said. "Okay." Black Impermanence nodded and threw the hell chain at the souls of the 8 Yin Yang disciples. Voila! The cold iron chain instantly wrapped around the 8 of them. "2 divine lords. We were killed by Eldritch before we even reached the end of our lives. We are innocent. We are innocent, divine lord. Divine lord, the one we should be capturing is Eldritch." Seeing the iron chain wrapped around them, the 8 of them cried out in unison. Although they were narrow-minded, they were still very smart. According to their calculations, they were indeed not at the end of their lives. Otherwise, they would not have dared to make an enemy out of Eldritch. All of you are cultivators. You should know the principle of karma is not empty. White impermanence said to the 8 souls, your current situation is not without reason. As for whether or not your lifespans have come to an end, and whether or not you've been wronged, let's talk about it when we reach the Yama Palace. Hearing White Impermanence's words, the 8 souls could only agree. Whoosh, you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.